Winter had come to the Seven Kingdoms. Its chill seeped not only through the stones of Winterfell, but through every heart in Westeros. The great war with the dead was won, but the realm was splintered, its survivors exhausted, hungry and wary of the next storm. Snow drifted through the courtyards in thick, ceaseless flurries, muffling the iron clang of the blacksmiths and silencing the laughter of children. Shadows moved behind frosted windows. The north, victorious but mourning, closed in upon itself once more. Tyrion Lannister stood on the battlements, the fur-trimmed cloak Jon Snow had lent him drawn tightly around his shoulders. His breath smoked in the frigid air as he peered down into the courtyard, watching a procession of battered carts rattle through the gates. Barrels of pickled fish, sacks of oats, a few casks of sour Dornish red, all guarded by stark men with gray cloaks and battered shields. Tyrion's gaze lingered on the faces of the Northerners. Hard men, grim and closed. Their eyes flicked up to him, distrust etched deep into the lines of their faces. His breath shivered. He was not welcome here. Not truly. Not after what the Lannisters had done to House Stark, and not after Daenerys' pyres had scorched King's Landing. But the war was over. If he wanted to survive, and more importantly, if he wanted the realm to survive, then he needed to do more than simply survive. He needed to build something new from the ruins. And that, Tyrion thought, would take more than clever words or gold. A low voice stirred him from his reverie. "You look cold, Lord Tyrion." Sansa Stark stood beside him, her red hair woven through with white, her cheeks flushed from the wind. She was taller than he remembered, and stronger, her blue eyes steady as she studied him. There was kindness there, but also steel. A northern steel he could neither charm nor outwit. "I am cold," Tyrion admitted. "It's a wonder any of you Northerners have the energy to hold a grudge, considering how much of your strength must go into not freezing to death." Sansa's lips twitched, almost a smile. "If you truly wish to warm yourself, you could come to the council chamber. The fire is fierce, and we've set out wine. The lords are waiting." "Ah," Tyrion said, forcing a lighter tone. "The wine's tempting. The lords, less so. And they're not all so terrible. Lady Sansa, your definition of not terrible and mine may differ greatly." A gust of wind stung Tyrion's eyes, bringing with it the distant sound of hounds barking. He studied Sansa's profile. The careful braid coiled above her ear, the silver direwolf brooch at her throat. "Will you stand with me?" he asked quietly. Sansa did not look at him. "That depends. Will you stand with us?" He did not answer at first. He gazed past the outer walls, across the snowbound fields, and the icy river winding away into the darkening north. "I came here," Tyrion said, "because there are debts in this world that cannot be paid with gold. The Lannisters did much that cannot be undone, to your family, to your people. But I am not my father, nor my sister. The realm is broken. I want to help you mend it." She met his gaze, searching. He wondered what she saw. The scars, the lines of care, the shadow of guilt. At last, she nodded. "Then come inside. Let's begin." The council chamber was a long, drafty room dominated by a single massive hearth. Flames leapt and spat within, painting the stone walls in flickering gold. The great table was crowded with lords and ladies: Manderly, Umber, Glover, Karstark, Reed. Arya was there too, sitting apart, her boots on the bench, a thin smile playing at her lips as she watched Tyrion's approach. Bran Stark sat in his wheeled chair at the end of the table, the firelight lost in the endless pools of his eyes. Jon Snow was gone, departed for the wall, and the council wore the scars of his absence. Yet Sansa ruled as Lady of Winterfell, with Arya at her side. And now, for reasons both practical and personal, they had allowed the last Lannister among them, though not unguarded. Tyrion took his seat at the table, careful not to meet anyone's eye at first. Sansa sat at the head, her voice cool and clear. "Lord Tyrion has asked for our patience and our ears. I have given him both. Now let us listen to what he offers." Tyrion looked around the table, weighing each gaze. Lord Manderley, white-bearded and ponderous, drummed his fingers on the oak. Lady Glover's eyes were narrow, skeptical. Only Arya watched him without hostility, her face unreadable. He poured himself a cup of wine, his hand steady despite the pressure. He sipped, feeling the eyes on him, then set the cup down. "I will not waste your time with apologies," Tyrion began. "You have heard too many from too many Southerners, and most meant nothing. I will not beg for forgiveness on behalf of my family. What I will do is tell you a truth." The lords shifted, listening. Tyrion pressed on. "The Seven Kingdoms are shattered. The Riverlands burn. The Westerlands are starving, and the Reach is a patchwork of petty kings. The Iron Islands raid what they can, and Dorne's princes have gone to ground. King's Landing is a ruin, haunted by ashes and ghosts." His words hung in the air, grave and unflinching. "And yet," he continued, "there are some among us who remember what the realm once was, what it could be again if we do not squander this chance. The North is strong. It is united. But winter cannot last forever. When the snows melt, your armies will grow restless. Your people will want more than bread and salt. You cannot stand alone forever, and the South cannot rebuild without your help." Lady Glover's voice was flinty. "What are you proposing, Lord Tyrion? That we bend the knee to a Lannister again?" "No," Tyrion said, meeting her gaze. "I'm proposing we do something neither side has dared before. That we set aside vengeance. That we speak not as enemies, nor as conqueror and conquered, but as those who survived the long night and would survive the long days to come. I propose an alliance between House Stark and House Lannister." Silence. A log popped in the fire. Arya glanced at Sansa, then back at Tyrion. "And what," Lord Manderley asked, "would such an alliance look like?" Tyrion smiled, faint and rueful. "It begins here, with trust, with trade, with shared purpose. I have no army nor gold. My family's lands are devastated. What I have is knowledge and a network of friends and agents across the South. I can bring grain from the Reach, iron from the Isles, information from Old Town and Dorne. I can help the North rebuild, not as a master, but as a partner." Lady Glover was unmoved. "And why should we trust you?" Tyrion turned to Sansa. "Because you trust her, and because I have nowhere else to go." Sansa's eyes softened, just a fraction. The debate that followed was fierce and long. Manderley spoke of oaths and honor, Glover of blood and memory. Arya, quiet but fierce, spoke for the living, that the world could not survive if every grudge became another war. Bran said nothing at all, but watched Tyrion with the unblinking gaze of someone who saw more than any of them. As the night deepened and the fire burned low, the lords began to see reason, some grudgingly, some with the relief of men who'd grown tired of hatred. There would be terms, conditions, safeguards, but the idea had been planted, a seed in winter's hard ground. That night, Tyrion found himself in the library, searching through dust-choked tomes for records of past alliances. He heard the door creak behind him and did not turn. "You spoke well," Sansa said softly. He closed the book, the old leather crackling in his hands. "I doubt they believe a word of it." She came to stand beside him, her hands folded before her. "They believe in me. That's enough for now." He looked at her, remembering their brief marriage in King's Landing, the fear and uncertainty, the quiet dignity she'd shown even then. "You have changed," he said. "So have you." He watched her, feeling the slow warmth of the fire, the gentler warmth of hope. "Do you trust me?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not yet, but I trust that you want to help. That will have to do." The following weeks were a flurry of letters, councils, and negotiation. Tyrion worked tirelessly, drafting missives to the few lords who still answered his seal, trading favors and promises for food and steel. Messages flew south, hidden in merchant wagons and tied to ravens' legs. Slowly, grudgingly, a trickle of grain and goods began to flow northward. In return, Stark furs and smoked meats went south, along with timber and rare metals from the Vale. At first, the lords of Winterfell watched him with suspicion. Tyrion made it a point to eat with the servants, to take walks with Arya, to advise Bran quietly on matters of history and precedent. He told no jokes about the North, no clever stories of Lannister wealth. He listened. He remembered names. He learned to drink northern ale without making a face. He watched the North begin to thaw. One morning, as the sun struggled through the clouds, Arya joined him in the Godswood. She was dressed in leathers, a sword strapped to her hip. "You're not like the other Lannisters," she said. "Thank you, Arya. I think," she smirked, "you could have run south, or tried to seize something for yourself. Why stay?" Tyrion looked at her, considering. "I've played the Game of Thrones all my life. I lost everything. Friends, family, pride. I have nothing left to want, except to make sure the world that comes after is better than the one before." Arya studied him, her eyes sharp as ever. "If you cross us, you know what'll happen." Tyrion smiled wryly. "I've seen enough northern justice to last me a lifetime." She nodded, and for the first time he thought she might believe him. It was not only Arya who softened. Lord Manderley, after several weeks of cautious watching, began to consult Tyrion on trade routes. Lady Karstark requested his aid in settling a dispute with a neighboring holdfast. Even the children of Winterfell, Lord's sons and daughters, fosterlings from the Vale, began to treat him with a wary respect. One day, Sansa found him teaching a group of girls to play savas. He was explaining a particularly tricky gambit when she entered, and the girls scattered, giggling. "Winning friends?" she teased. "Savas is a game of patience and calculation," Tyrion said. "I thought the North could use a bit of both." She sat beside him. "You're happier here than you were at court." Tyrion nodded. "There's less to lose, more to build." Sansa was quiet a moment. "When my father was alive, he spoke often of peace, of alliances that might last, rather than just serve one man's ambition." He studied her, wondering what she wanted him to say. "I think we could build something that lasts, Sansa, if we're careful, if we trust one another." She smiled, faint and sad. "Then let's begin." Together, they set about the work of reconciliation, not just between houses, but within the hearts of their people. Sansa called her banners for a feast, inviting the minor lords and holdfasts who had kept their distance. Tyrion composed the invitations, each one carefully worded to acknowledge old wounds, but also the promise of a new start. The night of the feast, Winterfell was ablaze with light. Lanterns swung from the trees, and the great hall echoed with song. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, pies, bread, and ale. Tyrion, dressed in a simple doublet of gray and white, moved from table to table, speaking to each guest, listening to their stories, offering small gestures of kindness, a toast, a compliment, a word of comfort for the grieving. Sansa presided at the high table, regal but approachable. She called the lords by name, thanked them for their service in the war, spoke of the North's need for unity. When Tyrion rose to speak, the hall fell silent. He did not speak of the Lannisters, nor of the past. He spoke of winter, and how it must end, of the strength that comes from standing together. He did not ask for forgiveness, only the chance to prove his worth. It was not a rousing speech. But when he sat down, he saw a change in the eyes that watched him, less suspicion, more hope. After the feast, Tyrion and Sansa walked the battlements. Snowflakes drifted around them, the night silent, except for the distant howl of a wolf. "Will it last?" Tyrion asked quietly. Sansa took his hand. "Just for a moment. If we're careful, if we're kind." Tyrion looked out over Winterfell, the fires flickering in the dark. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. But outside the walls, the world was not so forgiving. News came of trouble in the Riverlands. Bandits, leftover soldiers from the war, ravaging the small folk. In the Westerlands, Casterly Rock was beset by famine and lawlessness. The south was a chaos of petty kings, and whispers of old enemies rising once more. Sansa summoned the council, and Tyrion laid out a plan. dispatching envoys, offering aid to loyal houses in the Westerlands, extending invitations to the Riverlands lords to meet in Winterfell. It was a gamble, but one that could knit the realm back together if it worked. Arya volunteered to ride south as their agent, swift and silent. Bran offered his own quiet counsel, and even the most skeptical lords began to see the value in Tyrion's advice. But not everyone was pleased. Late one night, a dagger was found beneath Tyrion's pillow, a warning blunt and unmistakable. He took it to Sansa, who studied it in silence. "Someone fears what you're building," she said at last. "Or who I used to be." She reached out, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "You are not your father, nor your sister. Remember that." He smiled, bitter and grateful. "The world may not. We will." As spring approached, Tyrion rode out with Sansa to visit the smaller villages, to listen to the people, to hear their grievances and hopes. They traveled incognito, as lord and lady, not as ruler and advisor. Tyrion found himself moved by the resilience of the North, its stubborn pride, its capacity for forgiveness. In a village near the Wolf's Wood, an old woman pressed a loaf of bread into his hands, her eyes wet with tears. "My son died fighting your family's men," she whispered. "But if Lady Sansa trusts you, so will I." Tyrion bowed his head, humbled. They returned to Winterfell, changed. Tyrion wrote letters deep into the night, forging alliances with lords in the Reach and Dorne, offering trade and the promise of peace. Some replied with suspicion, but others, weary of war, agreed to talk. Slowly, the realm began to heal. The days grew longer, the snow melting from the fields. The first green shoots of grass poked through the slush. And with them, a new hope. The North, once cold and closed, was opening to the world once more. And Tyrion Lannister, who had lost everything, found himself at the heart of something new. A reconciliation not only between houses, but between old wounds and the promise of tomorrow. But shadows still lingered. Old enemies, old grudges, the memory of fire and blood. The work was only beginning. Yet in Winterfell, beneath the broken towers and new-built walls, something fragile and precious was taking root. Tyrion looked to Sansa, to Arya, to the lords gathered in council, and felt, at last, a sense of belonging. The Game of Thrones was not over. But for the first time, Tyrion played not for himself, nor for power, but for peace. And that, he thought, might make all the difference. The thaw was slow, creeping into the north not as a wave, but as a persistent, relentless undertone that signaled the end of winter. In the land around Winterfell, the snow was retreating, exposing frozen fields and rutted tracks where wagon wheels had bitten deep during the coldest moons. Ravens soared in pairs again, their calls echoing over the ramparts, and the stark banners fluttered softer in the gentler breeze. For all this quiet change, there was no quiet in the hearts of those who lived beneath these banners, nor in the minds of those who sought to shape the future that now loomed so uncertain and so achingly close. It was Tyrion who rose before the dawn most mornings, finding that old habits, the restless scheming, the planning that never ended, were hard to break, even with peace beginning to show its face. Sleep was a fragile thing, and Tyrion was too aware of how easily the world might shatter again. On such a morning, he sat alone in the solar, a single candle burning at his elbow, ink staining his short, clever fingers. His letter to Lord Edmure Tully was already half written, its words chosen with the care of a jeweler setting the final stones in a crown. There was a sound at the door, the merest brush of cloth. Arya entered with the quiet of a shadow, her eyes sharp, her manner direct. She glanced at the letter, then at Tyrion, her arms folded over her chest. "You look as if you've not slept in days," she said. "I haven't," he replied, not bothering to soften the truth. "Every day I am reminded of how fragile this peace is. We make progress, and someone tries to slip a blade between my ribs. Or the lords threaten to pack up their wagons and return to their hills. I never realized before how much of ruling was simply convincing people not to murder each other for another week." Arya smirked, then sobered. You should be careful. The last time peace grew in the north, someone always tried to trample it. Do you fear for me? Tyrion asked, arching a brow. Arya considered, then shrugged. I don't trust easily. But Sansa does. Bran does, in his own way. And the people listen to her. They'll listen to you, if you keep giving them reason to. Then no. He set the quill aside and regarded her. You know the Riverlands better than anyone left here. If we are to rebuild anything like unity, Edmure must be brought north. But he hesitates, worried he will become a hostage. The Lannister name is still a bitter taste. He's cautious, Arya said. That's not a fault, these days. I can ride south. Talk to him. He knows me, he trusts me, or as much as he trusts anyone. But I won't drag him here on a leash. I wouldn't ask it, Tyrion replied. But bring him. Let him see with his own eyes what's becoming of Winterfell. That the north has not turned into a kingdom of wolves and ghosts. Arya grinned, fierce and bright. There are still wolves and ghosts, but less so now, thanks to you. When she left, Tyrion sat for a long while, letting the silence fill the room. He dipped his quill again, the candle's light trembling over the lines of his next letter. The days blurred, council meetings following council meetings. Tyrion and Sansa met with the bannermen in the Great Hall, listened to merchants who had braved the broken roads, and negotiated with the stubborn lords of the Vale, who wanted assurances before sending grain and iron north. Tyrion played his part with care, careful never to overstep, always allowing Sansa to lead, always giving the impression that he served the north, not ruled it. It was Sansa's idea to send for the children of the minor houses, to foster them at Winterfell. She said it was for their education, for their safety. But Tyrion recognized the wisdom. Children raised together, eating the same bread, learning the same lessons. They would see each other as kin, not as rivals. It was a long game, but Sansa was thinking of the years to come. Not just the next season. There were moments between them too, private, precious moments, when the burdens of office could be set aside, and they might simply be two souls, battered by the world, but not yet defeated by it. On a rare warm afternoon, Tyrion and Sansa walked through the Godswood, where the first green leaves unfurled upon the weirwood's branches. Sansa's cloak was the color of twilight, her hands clasped before her. Do you remember? The day you saved me from Joffrey. When you dared to speak against him, when no one else would. Tyrion smiled, pained by the memory. I remember. I was a fool, perhaps, but a well-meaning one. You were kind, she said, her voice low. There was little kindness in King's Landing then or now. I never forgot. Then he looked at her, the words unsaid between them like the hush before rain. She did not reach for his hand, nor he for hers, but something passed between them, an understanding, fragile but real. Later that night, as the torches guttered in the hallways and the sound of laughter faded, Tyrion sat with Bran beneath the broken tower. The boy who was no longer quite a boy gazed at the moon with eyes that seemed to see through time itself. Do you believe it will last? Tyrion asked him. This peace we're forging? Bran did not answer for a long time. Nothing lasts forever, he said at last, his voice distant and strange. But sometimes, the effort is the reward. The trying, the reaching for something better. Tyrion nodded, comforted, in spite of himself. Word reached Winterfell at last, that Arya was riding north with Edmure Tully in her train, along with a handful of Riverlands retainers. Sansa ordered the kitchens to prepare a feast, and the hall to be swept, as if the arrival of the Tully Lord was the coming of summer itself. When Edmure arrived, he was older, grayer, his manner careful, but not unfriendly. He embraced Sansa and Arya, nodded politely to Tyrion, and presented Bran with a carved trout from Riverrun's own woods. The negotiations that followed were long and intricate, but Edmure's visit bore fruit. He agreed to send food and men north, in exchange for guarantees of safety and a stark presence at River Run. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was progress, and that was enough. The river that ran beneath Winterfell thawed. And with it, the mood of the castle softened. Even the most suspicious lords began to see the value in Tyrion's counsel, the promise in Sansa's vision. Grain wagons from the riverlands became a regular sight, and the lords of the north, fattened by the prospect of peace, began to dream of more than mere survival. Not everyone welcomed the change. In the shadows of the keep, voices muttered, and twice, Tyrion caught the flicker of a cloaked figure watching him from across the courtyard. Old wounds bled easily, and there were those who would never forgive, never forget. On a cold evening, as the council prepared to meet, Sansa summoned Tyrion to her solar. She stood at the window, gazing out over the darkening fields. "There are rumors," she said softly. "Lord Ryswell has been stirring up the old families. He says you seek to make the North a vassal of the South again. That you will betray us, as your kin betrayed my father." Bender Wall. Tyrion closed his eyes. "I suspected as much." Sansa turned to him, her face pale in the waning light. "I told him he was wrong, that you have done more to heal the North than any southern lord. But he is not alone in his doubts. You must be careful." "I have no illusions about my safety," Tyrion said. "But I will not leave. Not while this work is unfinished." She crossed the room and, for the first time, laid her hand atop his. "You are not alone. The North remembers, yes, but it also forgives, when given reason. You've given them many." He squeezed her hand gently, and together, they faced the darkness gathering at the edge of peace. Trouble, when it came, arrived not with horns and banners, but with a whisper in the night. A messenger from the south, gaunt and hollow-eyed, brought word of an uprising in the Westerlands. A new pretender, styling himself a Lannister, had rallied a host of desperate men and declared himself Lord of Casterly Rock. He blamed Tyrion for the woes of the West, for the loss of gold and glory, and vowed to cut the dwarf's heart from his chest and send it to Winterfell wrapped in a lion's skin. Sansa called an emergency council, the hall lit by dozens of candles, faces drawn and tense. Tyrion stood before them, his voice steady. "This is not the first time my name has been used as a banner for war," he said. "Nor will it be the last. But this pretender is no lion. He is a jackal, gnawing at the bones of a ruined house. Still, the Westerlands have suffered, and desperate men will follow anyone who promises them gold." Lord Manderly thumped his fist on the table. "Should we march then? Crush them before they grow stronger?" Sansa shook her head. "War is what he wants. If we fight, the realm will bleed again. We must show the West that there is another way." Tyrion nodded. "Send envoys. Promise fair trade, fair justice. Appeal to the miners, the farmers, the small folk. They care little for banners, only for bread. Promise them a share in what we are building here. And if the pretender comes north, we will face him. Not with swords, but with truth." There was grumbling, but Sansa held firm. Arya volunteered to ride west, carrying letters of peace and offers of support to those who would listen. The council dispersed, some hopeful, some fearful. That night, Tyrion walked the battlements, the cold sharp and bracing. He remembered the words of his father, spoken long ago. "A Lannister always pays his debts, but these were debts of blood, of trust, of forgiveness. He owed more than gold could ever pay." The days passed. Word came that Arya had reached the Westerlands, that she had met with miners, smiths, farmers. The response was cautious but not hostile. The pretender Lannister's strength was failing. Men deserted him for want of food, for lack of purpose. Tyrion's name became less a curse and more a rumor of a new world, where even a Lannister might be forgiven. It was during one of these anxious, hopeful days that Bran called Tyrion to him. The young Lord of Winterfell sat beside the heart tree, its red eyes weeping sap in the dawn light. "I've seen a shadow, Tyrion," Bran said, his voice echoing in the hush. "A shadow that falls across the west. The past is not so easily buried. Be vigilant." "Menso." Tyrion shivered, feeling the old fear creeping in. "I am always vigilant." Bran looked at him, the weight of centuries in his gaze. "You are not alone. Remember that." Tyrion returned to the keep, his resolve strengthened. The spring wore on. The council meetings grew less contentious, the feasts warmer, the children's laughter louder. The first lambs were born in the fields, and with them, a new hope. Sansa's plan to foster the children of the bannermen bore fruit. They played together, learned together, quarreled and made peace, just as their parents once had, but without the weight of old blood. Tyrion found himself growing used to the rhythms of northern life. He learned to ride in the snow, to hunt in the woods with the younger lords, to share in the toasts at the end of long council meetings. He discovered that the North's coldness was not a lack of warmth, but a reserve born of centuries of hardship. A reserve that, once breached, offered a loyalty deeper than any oath. It was on such a night, after a long day of planning, that Sansa invited Tyrion to her solar once more. She poured wine for them both, her movements graceful, her eyes thoughtful. "We have come far," she said softly. "Further than I dared hope when first you arrived." Tyrion studied her, the lamplight catching the copper in her hair. "You gave me a chance. That's all anyone can ask." She smiled, a genuine warmth that made her seem younger, softer. "What do you want, Tyrion? When all this is finished, what will you do?" He considered the question carefully. "I once thought I wanted power. Then I wanted freedom. Now, I think I want peace. A place to belong. A family of sorts." "And now?" Sansa looked at him, and for a moment, Tyrion thought she might reach for his hand. Instead, she said, "You have a place here. If you want it." He smiled, the ache in his chest something sweet and sharp. "I do," he said. The candles burned low, and outside, the stars blazed cold and bright over Winterfell. The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet industry, the work of rebuilding and renewal. Tyrion continued his correspondence with the South, forging new alliances with houses once thought lost to chaos. Sansa organized a council of lords from the north and the Riverlands, gathering them beneath Winterfell's roof to plan for the future. For the first time in memory, Stark and Lannister, Tully and Glover, Manderly and Reed broke bread together, spoke of trade, of law, of peace. There were setbacks. There always were. Bandits raided a caravan near the Neck. A merchant from White Harbor was found dead in his chambers, a Lannister coin pressed into his palm. Sansa and Tyrion investigated together, rooting out the agents of old feuds, exposing the killers, and banishing them from the north. The process was painful, slow, but relentless. Trust, once so easily broken, was rebuilt, brick by careful brick. One evening, as Tyrion watched the children of Winterfell play in the yard, he realized with a start that he could not remember the last time he had felt truly afraid. The lords who once muttered behind his back now greeted him with nods, sometimes even smiles. He was no longer an outsider. He was, in a way he had never imagined, home. Sansa joined him on the steps, her cloak trailing in the dust. "It's working," she said almost in wonder. He nodded. "Not without cost. But nothing worth building ever comes easy." Dender. She leaned into him, just a little, and he let her. Together, they watched the future take shape before their eyes, fragile, imperfect, but real. The sun dipped below the walls, and the fires of Winterfell burned through the night. The moon hung fat and low over Winterfell's black silhouette, washing the ancient stones with its spectral glow. Tyrion's dreams came and went in flickers and fragments. A goblet tipping, red wine pooling like blood across a banquet table, Lannister lions twisted into knots of gold and crimson, the slow unfurling of a dire shadow over fields of white. He awoke with a start, a cold sweat gathering at his temples. The sheets were tangled. The wind battered the shutters, carrying the distant, hollow cry of an owl. He pushed himself upright and reached for the goblet head left on the table. But the wine had gone stale and sour. He drank it anyway, let its astringent tang anchor him to the present. He could not escape the certainty that the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. By morning, the castle was already humming. Kitchen boys darted through corridors with baskets of root vegetables and salted fish, the smell of baking bread thick on the air. Sansa was up before the dawn as she always was, reviewing ledgers and correspondence, flanked by Maester Wolkan and the ever-watchful Lady Glover. Arya had not returned from her westward mission, and each day the silence grew heavier. Bran, silent as ever, spent his hours near the Godswood, communing with his ravens, and watching the horizon for threats that only he could see. Tyrion moved through these waking hours as if in a play whose script he'd only partly memorized. He counseled Sansa, but he also brokered peace between squabbling merchants, taught the children of the lesser lords to read, advised Bran on repairing the roof beams in the East Wing, and found himself the unlikely judge of a dispute over stolen sheep between two farmers from the Barrowlands. He wrote letter after letter, working his contacts in the south and west, threading alliances together with the fragile twine of mutual need. He was, in the eyes of most, now truly a fixture of Winterfell. Some called him a southern advisor, some called him Sansa's clever friend, some, half in jest, half in hope, called him the North's little lion. To his face, most addressed him as Lord Tyrion. He was not a Stark, but neither was he an exile. It was a delicate balance, and each day he worried that a breath too strong in any direction would tip it all into ruin. He was in the library with Bran on the morning the first raven arrived, a scrap of parchment tied to its leg, marked with the broken lion of House Lannister. Tyrion's hands trembled a little as he broke the wax and scanned the words. His brother Jaime's bold, impatient hand. A plea and a warning. The Lannister pretenders' army had collapsed outside Lannisport. The miners and smallfolk had turned on their so-called lord, burning his banners and opening their gates to a delegation sent by Tyrion's own agents. It was over. The rebellion had failed, and peace, it seemed, might take root after all. But Jaime's letter held a note of worry. The Ironborn had landed on the western coast, and with the old alliances crumbling, none could say what their next move would be. "Beware the calm, little brother," Jaime had written. "The sea is never still." Bran, reading over his shoulder, offered no comfort. "They are not coming for you yet, but old ghosts haunt the waves." Tyrion's sigh was long and tired. "I'd almost forgotten what it feels like to live in fear." Bran's smile was as thin as winter sunlight. "You never forget. You only learn to hide it better." That night, Tyrion took the news to Sansa, who sat in her solar surrounded by correspondence and the scent of spiced wine. She listened carefully, her eyes never leaving his face. "It's a victory," he said, trying to sound more hopeful than he felt. "It's a reprieve," Sansa replied. "Victories are short things these days." She poured them each a cup of wine, and for a while they sat in silence, two battle-weary comrades watching the fire. "How long can we hold this together, do you think?" Sansa asked. "Until someone cleverer than me finds a way to ruin it," Tyrion answered, half in jest. Then, softer, "Or until we teach the realm to want peace more than it wants revenge." Sansa's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. "Then we'd best start teaching." For a brief, precious time, Winterfell basked in that reprieve. The snows melted, the rivers surged, and the first caravans from the Riverlands and the Vale arrived with goods for trade and news of stability returning to the southern roads. The great hall was filled with laughter again, the clatter of cups and the shrieks of children at play. Tyrion, ever the careful observer, saw the change in the faces around him. The haunted look faded, replaced by something resembling hope. He continued his work. Letters to the Westerlands, to the Reach, to Dorne. Efforts to reopen the gold mines. Efforts to broker marriages between minor lords of North and South. All these things were seeds planted in stubborn soil, but some began to sprout. Then, as surely as winter must return, trouble found its way to Winterfell's gates. It was dusk when the warning horns sounded. Tyrion and Sansa were dining privately, a rare pleasure, their plates heaped with warm bread and honeyed ham. When the doors burst open and Sir Roderick entered, his face grim. "Riders at the gates, my lady, armed. They fly no banners." Tyrion set down his fork, heart hammering. "How many?" "A dozen, maybe more. They ask for you, Lady Sansa, and for Lord Tyrion. They say they bear tidings from the Iron Islands." Sansa's jaw tightened. "Show them to the hall, but keep the guard close." They entered in silence, faces half hidden by hoods. The leader, a tall woman with salt and pepper hair and eyes the color of old pewter, unbuckled her sword and laid it before Sansa. Her voice was low, rolling with the cadence of the western seas. "I am Yara Greyjoy. I come to treat." Tyrion recognized her at once, the woman who'd once allied with Daenerys, who had bent the knee in Dragonstone and fought at the Battle of Ice. He inclined his head, wariness and memory warring within him. Sansa spoke first. "You are welcome, Lady Yara, but your arrival is unheralded. What brings the Ironborn to Winterfell?" Yara's expression was grave. "The world has changed, Lady Stark. We once served dragons, then we served the dead. Now, the Iron Islands stand alone, battered and leaderless. My uncle Euron is dead. My brother Theon was a Stark in the end. I come seeking alliance, not plunder." There was a murmured stir among the assembled lords, but Tyrion watched Sansa closely. She was measuring Yara, as a jeweler might weigh a rare gem. "We are not in the habit of welcoming reavers into our halls," Sansa replied. "The scars of your raids still mark the north." Yara bowed her head. "I make no excuses for what's past. I seek a place in what comes next. My people can raid or they can trade. Give us a reason to choose the latter." Tyrion spoke. "The Ironborn hold the sea lanes. If we would knit the realm together, we need your ships and your sailors. If Lady Yara will swear oaths and give hostages, I see no reason not to try." There was a long pause, and then Sansa nodded. "Swear your oath, Lady Yara. We will judge you by your actions." Before the night was out, terms were struck. Yara would send her nephew, a boy of 10, to Winterfell as ward and guarantee of peace. In exchange, the Iron Islands would ferry grain and timber, and their longships would protect northern traders from pirates along the coasts. When the council was dismissed, Sansa and Tyrion lingered by the dying fire. "It could be a trick," she murmured. "Or it could be a beginning," Tyrion replied. "If we mean to build a better world, someone must trust first." She nodded, her eyes haunted but hopeful. In the weeks that followed, the Ironborn were as good as their word. Trade picked up. Pirates were driven from the shivering sea. Yara herself lingered in Winterfell, learning the ways of the land, earning the grudging respect of the northern lords. She and Arya struck up a strange friendship, often sparring in the yard with wooden swords and laughter that rang like steel on steel. Edmure Tully returned to Riverrun with assurances for the Riverlands. Ravens flew to and from Old Town, bringing word that the Maesters were organizing a conclave to confirm the peace and codify new laws. Tyrion, summoned to advise, prepared pages of proposals. Laws for trade, protections for the weak, punishments for those who clung to the old ways of blood and fire. One afternoon, Sansa and Tyrion walked together through the budding orchards outside Winterfell's walls. The apple trees were dusted with the first hints of blossom, and the grass was alive with the green hope of spring. "Do you ever regret it?" Sansa asked quietly. "Staying here? Giving your life to this cause?" Tyrion considered. "There are moments, in the quiet hours before dawn, when I think of Casterly Rock, of another life, another wife, another fate. But those moments pass. I belong here. I am more myself here than I ever was in King's Landing. I am a Lannister, yes, but I am also something new, something I never dared hope I could become." "And I will." Sansa's hand brushed his. "We could be more, you and I, not for power, nor for duty, but for ourselves." He studied her, heart pounding. "Are you certain?" She smiled, the faintest trace of the young girl she'd once been. "Certain enough to risk it." They walked on, neither speaking, but each aware that the future had shifted in some small, irrevocable way. A feast was called to celebrate the new peace. Banners of Stark, Tully, Greyjoy, and even Lannister hung together in the great hall. There was music, laughter, and food enough to silence the ghosts of famine and war. Arya and Yara competed in archery, the crowd roaring at each near miss. Bran presided, his calm presence a silent blessing. As the night deepened, Tyrion stood to address the hall. He spoke of the long winter and the harder years before it. He spoke of the courage it took to trust, to forgive, to build something new in the ashes of old wrongs. He raised his cup to Sansa, to the lords of the North and the Isles, to the children who would inherit the world they had fought to remake. Afterward, as the last revelers drifted away, Tyrion and Sansa stood on the ramparts. The sky was clear and full of stars, the wind carrying the scent of apple blossom and pine. "We have done well," Tyrion said softly. "Better than I ever thought possible." Sansa leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "The realm is not whole, but it is healing. And so are we." He wrapped his arm around her, and together they watched the future unfold, uncertain but theirs. The next morning, ravens brought news of Arya's return. She rode through the gates at the head of a small party, a mixed company of Riverland's men, Ironborn, and even a pair of Westerland knights. She had been to the farthest reaches of the realm, carrying Sansa's letters, Tyrion's bargains, and the fragile hope of something better. Arya met Tyrion in the yard, her face sunburnt and fierce. "You were right," she said simply. "There are people out there who want what we're building here. Not all of them, but enough." Tyrion smiled, relief flooding him. "Then it begins." That afternoon, Sansa assembled the council, now a thing of many banners and many tongues. Bran gave his blessing. Yara offered the strength of the Iron Islands. Edmure promised the rivers would flow north and south alike. Arya pledged to ride where needed, a wolf and a sword in service of peace. Tyrion stood beside Sansa at the head of the table, her hand hidden in his, their eyes shining with the knowledge of all they had endured, all they had lost, and all they still hoped to gain. Outside, Winterfell bustled with life. The smiths at their forges, the children at their games, the banners snapping in a gentle breeze. The long night was over. Dawn was breaking. For the first time, Tyrion allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the reconciliation he had begun was not just a pause between storms, but the first true spring of the realm. And if old wounds never healed fully, at least they no longer bled. He squeezed Sansa's hand, and together they turned toward the window, toward the rising sun, toward a future they had forged together. Not as Stark or Lannister, but as builders, healers, and, if the gods were kind, lovers in a new world at last. Ka. The shadows stretched long over the training yard, as Tyrion watched Arya dance between the posts, her blade glinting in the sinking sun. The northern wind tugged at her hair, tossing it like a banner behind her, and each step was a statement, each turn a warning to the old ghosts that haunted Winterfell. Tyrion leaned against the rough stone, arms folded, and tried not to think of how fragile all of this remained. They had peace for now, a peace built on clever words and necessary compromise. But in the quiet corners of the keep, he could still feel the tension in the air, the old rivalries biding their time like wolves waiting for weakness. The great hall was being readied for another council. Fresh rushes had been laid, and new banners, one for each house now counted among Winterfell's allies, were strung along the walls. The children who had once scuttled out of Tyrion's path now peered at him with frank curiosity, some bold enough to ask questions about dragons or Lannister gold, or whether he really could drink as much as the songs claimed. He answered their questions patiently, with more honesty than he'd ever used at court. It was easy to be honest here. He had less to hide. Sansa presided over the preparations, her face set in the mask of quiet authority that had become second nature. Tyrion met her eyes across the hall, and for a moment the mask slipped. She smiled. Just the briefest, softest curl at the corners of her lips. It was enough to steady him. When dusk bled into full night, the lords and their retinues gathered. Glover and Manderly, grim-faced and cautious. Lady Yara, rough and salt-stained, but clearly more comfortable with each passing week. Edmure, already looking more at home in Winterfell's stone embrace than he ever had in River Run's watery halls. Bran was wheeled to the head of the table, his presence silent but definitive. Arya took her place beside Yara, the two exchanging a private grin. Tyrion sat at Sansa's right, the position of trust both comforting and quietly daunting. Sansa began, her voice clear in the hush. "We are not what we were when the snows first fell," she said, her gaze sweeping the lords. "We have bled, and we have lost, but we have also rebuilt. The North stands stronger for its wounds, not in spite of them." Glover, never one to waste words, grunted his agreement. "We've survived. That's more than most." Tyrion cleared his throat. "Surviving is good. Thriving is better. If we are to do more than simply endure, we must look outward as well as inward. The Lords of the Vale and the Reach have sent their replies. They wish to send envoys. The old wounds are deep, but the world is hungry for what we can offer." "Menishanur." Lady Yara lifted her cup. "The Iron Islands are ready. Our ships are your ships, Lady Stark. You've kept your word to us. We'll keep ours." Edmure nodded. "The Riverlands are with you. There's unrest in the west, but your name, Tyrion, and the Stark name carry weight. The small folk believe there's a future worth following." There was a murmur of assent. Tyrion noted the looks exchanged around the table, the guarded optimism, the new lines of trust drawn between old enemies. He did not allow himself to relax. It was at moments like these, when peace seemed closest, that disaster so often found its chance. The council debated through the evening, hammering out the particulars of new roads and shared granaries, discussing the fates of orphans and the distribution of coin. Bran's voice was soft but carried authority, a reminder that the past still shaped every decision, and that the new world they were forging could not afford to forget what had been lost. When at last the council adjourned, the lords and ladies left in ones and twos, voices low, their minds full of bargains struck and promises to keep. Tyrion lingered, watching the hall empty, feeling the weight of the day press down on his shoulders. He had never felt more tired or more alive. Sansa touched his arm, her hand warm through the fabric of his sleeve. "Walk with me," she said, and he followed her without protest. They wandered the battlements. Below, lanterns winked in the yards, and the torches on the walls flickered in the cool spring air. Sansa's hair shone copper in the torchlight. They paused beneath the high tower, the sky above them deep and clear, the stars cold and remote. "You did well," Sansa said. "I merely played my part," Tyrion replied. "This is your court, my lady. I am only the fool who juggles its troubles." Sansa smiled, turning to face him fully. "You are no one's fool, Tyrion. You see what others miss. You hold the council together." He shrugged, embarrassed, his breath ghosting in the dark. "Sometimes I wonder if I am simply putting off the inevitable. So much has been built on fragile ground." Sansa's eyes searched his. "Fragile things can become strong, if given time. We are proof of that." Then too, they stood together in silence, the wind tugging at their cloaks. The night too beautiful and too tenuous to spoil with more words. Spring deepened, and with it came the first real warmth of the year. The markets filled with travelers. Some cautious, some bold, all hungry for trade and hope. Tyrion met with southern merchants in the Godswood, negotiating the return of the first true harvests to the north. The numbers were promising. Casks of Reach wine, sacks of barley and oats, bolts of Myrish cloth for Stark wool and furs. Each trade sealed with a handshake, each deal a step toward something like prosperity. He found himself speaking more often to the children of the lords, who crowded into the solar for lessons. He taught them Sivas, taught them the lessons of old wars, how pride could destroy, how mercy could build. Sometimes Sansa joined him, sitting quietly in the corner, a small smile on her lips as the children argued over their moves and tactics. One evening, after a long day's work, Arya found him in the library, surrounded by scrolls and dusty ledgers. "You're becoming a northerner," she teased, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up, raising a brow. "Do I seem so grim?" "No," she said, "but you look at peace." "I never thought I'd see the day." Tyrion considered her words. "Perhaps I am, Arya. For the first time, I feel as though my life has weight. Meaning. She smiled, a fleeting, wild thing. Then hold on to it. The world won't give you many such moments. Arya's presence brought news too. She had ridden far and wide, speaking to lords and small folk, gathering whispers and promises. She carried with her a letter from Lady Olenna's heir in the Reach, inviting a Stark and Lannister delegation to Highgarden. It was a sign that the world beyond the north was stirring, ready to join what Winterfell had begun. Sansa read the letter over breakfast, her fingers tracing the elegant script. It would be a bold move. The North, the West, the Reach, together, we could set the terms for the next age. Tyrion grinned. Shall we ride, my lady? You, me, Arya? Let the realm see we are not afraid. She gave him a sideways look. Half challenge, half affection. We shall. Preparations began at once. Bran, serene as ever, promised to watch over Winterfell in their absence. Arya sharpened her blades, already restless for the road. Yara Greyjoy offered ships, but Sansa chose to ride, a statement to the world that the North was open and unafraid. Their party rode south in late spring. The journey was long, but the roads were safer now, the villages alive with the buzz of planting and trade. Tyrion watched the landscape change, the bare hills of the north giving way to the green and gold of the Reach, the air warming, the trees blossoming, rivers fat with meltwater. They were met outside Highgarden by a party of Tyrell bannermen, the new Lady of Highgarden at their head. She greeted Sansa warmly, kissed Arya's cheeks, and bowed to Tyrion with a knowing smile. "You have done what so many others could not, Lord Tyrion," she said as they entered the castle's great hall. "You have made the lion and the wolf lie down together." Tyrion bowed. It is easier when neither side is hungry. Highgarden was a marvel. Lush gardens, fountains sparkling in the sun, orchards heavy with fruit. Sansa walked the grounds with the Lady of Highgarden, comparing notes on crops and trade. Arya explored the city's markets and alleys, learning every secret path. Tyrion attended councils with Reach and Westerland's lords, advocating for mutual aid, for trade routes restored, for old debts to be set aside. At first, the negotiations were cautious, each house protecting its own interests. Tyrion listened, advised, suggested, always careful to speak plainly. He reminded them of the long night, of how death had not cared for banners or bloodlines. He spoke of the children growing together in Winterfell, of the iron-born ships sailing in peace, of what could be built if they dared to trust. Slowly, the mood shifted. The Reach agreed to send wheat and barley north, in exchange for timber and furs. The Westerlands, represented by a distant cousin of Tyrion's, agreed to open the mines to shared investment, with the profits divided among the major houses. It was the beginnings of something greater than any of them had dared imagine. Sansa shone in these councils, her words measured and wise. Arya spoke less, but when she did, the lords listened, her presence a living symbol that the North could not be bought or threatened, only respected. On the final night in Highgarden, there was a feast. Lanterns hung in the trees, the tables groaned with fruit and meat and wine. Musicians played, and laughter filled the air. Tyrion danced with Sansa beneath a bower of roses, their steps awkward at first, then sure. Arya sparred with one of Lady Olenna's grandsons, winning easily and earning cheers from the watching guests. Later in the gardens, Sansa and Tyrion sat together, watching the moonlight silver the petals. "You have done it," Sansa whispered. "You have given the realm a second chance." "We have done it," Tyrion corrected. "And we will have to keep doing it every day, or it will fall apart." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the scent of roses thick in the air. "I am not afraid." He closed his eyes, letting the peace of the moment sink deep into his bones. When they returned north, the changes they had set in motion followed them. Caravans from the Reach arrived in the north, bringing new goods and new faces. The gold mines began to produce once more, and with the wealth came new opportunities. Roads rebuilt, orphanages founded, the first university north of the Neck planned for White Harbor. The old wounds were not forgotten, but they no longer festered. In Winterfell, life continued its measured, hopeful march. The children grew, the banners flew, and the council meetings grew less tense with each passing moon. One evening, as the first leaves began to turn, Sansa stood with Tyrion in the Godswood, her hand in his, their breath misting in the cooling air. "Will it last, do you think?" she asked. Tyrion squeezed her hand. "Nothing lasts forever. But I think this, what we've made, will endure long enough to matter." She smiled. "That is enough." The moon rose over Winterfell, bright and full. In the heart of the ancient keep, a Lannister and a Stark stood together, not as rivals but as partners, and the North, for the first time in living memory, felt like home. Oh, Ka. The autumn mists drifted in over the fields beyond Winterfell, a pale hush softening the land, weaving between the half-harvested rows and curling in ghostly skeins about the ancient towers. Tyrion watched from a window above the Godswood as the first hints of gold touched the trees, leaves giving up their stubborn green. The air had changed. He could taste it, crisp and tart, edged with the scent of wood smoke and ripening apples. It was the season of remembering and of gathering in what the long summer and brief spring had sown. The mornings were cool now, and the castle woke slowly, firelight kindling in one chamber after another, as servants bustled with cloaks and warm bread. Tyrion had come to relish these dawns, pacing the parapets before the rest of the world was awake, letting the quiet fill him. Sometimes Sansa joined him, silent and thoughtful, her hair braided down her back like a burnished rope, eyes the same gray-blue as the distant sky. They rarely spoke at such times. Their silence was companionable, full of the unspoken. They shared the news of each day over breakfast. Reports from the south, a new shipment of wool or wine, a letter from the maesters at Old Town, or a missive penned in Arya's quick, blotted hand from some wind-bitten border town. Sometimes Tyrion would share a jest, and Sansa's laughter would roll out soft and surprised, a sound he treasured more than any golden cup. The lords of the North had grown used to his presence, and now their children, and even their maesters, came to him for counsel. The lordly sons wanted to hear tales of dragons and southern intrigue. The daughters asked him for stories of his travels, and sometimes for advice in the dangerous art of Saivas. He treated them all as equals, and never once did he let his pride lead him to forget the price of every comfort he enjoyed. But the realm was changing, and each new wind brought with it both promise and peril. It was on a morning of such promise that Bran summoned him to the Godswood. Tyrion found him beneath the weirwood, the white branches stark against the brightening sky. The boy king was not alone. A raven perched on his wrist, its black eyes glinting, feathers ruffling as Tyrion approached. "You asked to see me," Tyrion said, tucking his hands into the sleeves of his cloak. Bran nodded. "The past is not so far behind as we'd like to believe. There are eyes in the south watching all that we build here. Some look with envy, some with fear. A storm is coming." Tyrion glanced up at the raven. "Do you see it?" Bran's gaze was distant. "I see many things. The storm can be weathered, if we do not turn against one another." Tyrion exhaled. "Then I suppose it's time for me to write more letters." Bran almost smiled. "Words can turn swords aside sometimes. Not always. Dain. I prefer the odds to fighting alone." The meeting weighed on Tyrion as the days shortened and the first frost silvered the grass. Sansa, sensing his mood, joined him in the solar one evening as he drafted yet another round of missives to the Lords of the Reach and the Vale. The candlelight gleamed on her hair as she sat beside him, reading over his shoulder. "You worry too much," she said softly. "It is my nature. The moment I stop worrying is the moment I've missed something vital." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the warmth of her presence chasing away the gloom. "We are not alone, Tyrion. Not anymore." He turned to her, the faintest smile on his lips. "You know, there was a time when I never expected to hear those words from anyone. Least of all a Stark." She reached up, her fingers brushing the line of his jaw. "We change. We have to." Then Dwar. That night, for the first time, he let himself believe in the future they were forging. Winterfell's prosperity grew more evident as the harvest continued. Markets swelled with traders from the Reach and even the Stormlands. The air was thick with the scents of roasting chestnuts and spiced cider, the clang of hammers in the forges, a steady music in the background. Tyrion walked the stalls, exchanging pleasantries with fishwives and butchers, learning the names of every apprentice who swept the flagstones clean. The Ironborn contingent remained in Winterfell through the season, their ships keeping the coasts secure, their young ward thriving in the care of Sansa's household. Yara Greyjoy had proved herself a shrewd and loyal ally, and there were even murmurs that the Iron Islands might finally adopt new laws, blending the old ways of salt and iron with the customs of the mainland. Edmure's men from Riverrun returned with tales of peace in the Riverlands, the grain flowing north and west, and even old enemies finding a new kind of kinship around the shared work of rebuilding. The Riverlords wrote that they had not seen such calm since before the First Rebellion. In the evenings, Arya sent word from the wild places. She had visited the Stormlands, and the Stormlords had sent back tokens of friendship, wildflowers and bolts of yellow silk, a gesture of hope. Arya's letters were short but vivid, her handwriting as restless as her feet. Met the new Baratheon. He knows what's at stake. He's clever. Watch him. I'll return before the first snow. With every raven, Tyrion felt the ties between the houses tightening, each new message a stitch in the tapestry they were weaving. But the tension never faded entirely. Twice, a traveler was found dead on the road to White Harbor, his throat cut, a southern coin pressed into his palm. Once, the granary at Barrowton was set ablaze by unknown hands. Sansa called a council, and together they soothed tempers, sent riders to patrol the roads, reassured the people that justice would be done. At night, Tyrion sometimes found himself awake, pacing the empty corridors, the shadows long and strange. He had known too many courts, seen too many betrayals, to trust that all would remain as it was. He watched the stars wheel through the windows and wondered whether peace was always only a breath away from breaking. One afternoon, as the sun dipped early behind the ramparts and the cold set in, Sansa asked him to join her in the Godswood. The last leaves rattled down through the branches as she knelt at the base of the heart tree, her cloak trailing over the roots. Tyrion watched her, silent, his own breath a mist in the air. When she spoke, her voice was small but sure. "There is something I must ask of you," she said. He knelt beside her, his heart quickening. "Ask." She turned to him, her eyes bright with hope and fear. "Will you stay, Tyrion? Not as a guest, nor as a lord from the south. Stay as my consort, my partner, here in the north. Rule with me, help me build what we have both dreamed of." He stared at her, feeling the world shift beneath him. For a long moment, he could not find his tongue, and then at last he said, "Ice. Yes, Sansa Taw. I will. Bendy." Her smile broke over her face like dawn over the mountains. They clasped hands, and for the first time since childhood, Sansa Stark wept. Not for grief, but for joy. That night, a small celebration was held in the Solar. Only the closest circle attended: Bran, Arya, Yara, Edmure, the children of the new generation who had grown to love Tyrion as much as their own kin. Wine flowed, laughter echoed, and even Bran smiled as Arya recited a poem she claimed to have learned from a Dornish bard. Outside, the snows began to fall again, the first flurries swirling down from the north. But inside Winterfell, there was warmth and light, and the feeling of hope finally realized. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the union of Stark and Lannister quickened. The banners of both houses were sewn side by the women of the castle, white and gold, crimson and gray. The kitchens prepared feasts, and the lords and ladies from every corner of the realm sent gifts and pledges of allegiance. Tyrion's siblings did not return. Jaime, it was said, had taken a post on the new council in King's Landing, brokering peace between the Westerlands and the Stormlands. Cersei's fate was a whispered tale, a cautionary ghost in the halls of power. Tyrion, for his part, mourned them quietly, one as a brother lost, the other as a warning never to be repeated. On the day of the ceremony, all of Winterfell turned out beneath a sky heavy with snow. The gods' wood was hung with lanterns, the air thick with the scent of pine and rosemary. Bran officiated, his voice calm and ancient as he bound their hands with white ribbon, blessing them in the old gods' names and the new out gods. Sansa wore a gown of white and silver, her hair crowned with a delicate circlet of holly and red berries. Tyrion stood beside her in stark gray, a lion brooch pinned to his chest. They spoke their vows not just to one another, but to the north, to the realm, to all those who had come through darkness to find themselves in the light. Arya placed a hand on Tyrion's shoulder, squeezing it with a sister's fierce affection. "You belong now," she whispered, her eyes shining. After the vows, the feast lasted deep into the night. Songs were sung in every dialect of the realm, cups raised to the future. Yara led a raucous toast with her men, and the children danced in the snow. Edmure's musicians played a song Tyrion remembered from his childhood, and he found himself weeping, laughing, and at last, at peace. Later, in the quiet that followed the revelry, Tyrion and Sansa sat together on the ramparts. The world spread before them. The moon rose, silvering the land, and Tyrion felt the weight of all he had survived, and all that might yet come. "We have built something," Sansa said, her voice full of wonder. He nodded. "And if we are wise and kind, it will outlast us both." Her hand found his. "We will be wise, we will be kind, and we will endure." Below them, Winterfell glowed with firelight and song. The realm breathed, healed, and hoped. Tyrion raised his face to the wind, and for the first time in a long and storied life, felt utterly, perfectly at home. Ah. Ha. Snow came in the night, silent and insistent, blanketing Winterfell's towers and battlements in a white that glowed blue beneath the moon. By dawn, the world beyond the walls had gone soft and secret, all harsh lines erased. Tyrion woke to the hush, blinking at the patterns of frost on the panes, and lay for a moment listening to Sansa's steady breathing. For a heartbeat he let himself drift, neither Lannister nor hand nor consort, simply a man whose heart had found unexpected peace in the north. When he rose, Sansa stirred beside him, her hair loose on the pillow, the embers in the hearth painting gold into the curve of her shoulder. She watched him, silent, with a fondness that needed no words. Outside, the castle was already alive with the bustle of snow. The children of lords and commoners alike gathered in the yard for a battle of their own devising, their shouts ringing off the stones. Servants swept paths, their laughter rising like smoke, and the kitchens churned out warm loaves and berry preserves, the scent trailing through the corridors. Arya, just returned from another circuit of the southern marches, rode into the yard with a whoop, the wind burned fresh on her cheeks, a length of scarlet silk at her belt, some token no doubt, from a grateful household or an enamored knight. Tyrion joined her at breakfast, the long tables crowded with familiar faces. Bran was already there, pale and quiet, his eyes hooded as he listened to reports from the coast. Yara Greyjoy, more northern by the day, traded barbed jokes with Lady Glover. Edmure Tully was discussing ice fishing with the White Harbor contingent, looking every inch the lord at peace, for all his years of exile and strife. Sansa took her seat last, her presence gathering the room's energy like a lodestone. She nodded to Tyrion, her fingers brushing his beneath the table. A secret pact, shared with no one but the gods. When the meal was finished, the council convened, and for the first time since their union, Sansa invited Tyrion to sit not only as her consort, but as co-ruler, her equal in word and authority, if not in blood. The lords accepted it quietly. By now they had grown used to the idea, and many had seen with their own eyes what wisdom and patience the little lion brought. They reviewed the state of the realm. River trade was steady. Banditry had dwindled to rumor. Letters from Old Town brought news of a Southern League, a confederation of city councils eager to send students to the university at White Harbor. The Reach, flush with the promise of another good harvest, sent a delegation to propose a festival celebrating the new peace. A festival to be held, at Lady Olenna's urging, in Winterfell itself. Sansa arched a brow at the missive, her mouth twitching in amusement. High Garden expects roses to bloom in snow. They might, if we plant enough gold beneath them, Tyrion replied, and laughter warmed the council chamber. Arya reported next, her news brisk and unsparing. The roads to the west were safe. The Ironborn had not raided in months. Instead, their ships ferried timber and saltfish up the White Knife, their crews paying honest coin. In the mountain clans, where peace had always seemed a foreign tongue, the children fostered at Winterfell were now sending letters home in the common tongue, and the old, full of talk of new games and shared lessons. Arya's gaze lingered on Tyrion as she finished. They trust you, even the wildest of them. That's no small feat. He inclined his head, feeling the old unease of expectation settle. So much hope, so easily toppled by a careless word or an unforeseen storm. Later in the solar, he and Sansa sat before the fire, documents spread across the table, Sansa reading aloud from a report on the first snows and the stores of barley and oats. Tyrion watched her, the lamplight tracing the line of her jaw, and felt the quiet thrum of contentment. In the north, everything was earned twice, first through hardship, then through endurance. A knock at the door. Bran entered, flanked by Maester Wolkan. The young lord wheeled himself forward, a parchment sealed in green wax in his lap. From the Vale, Bran said. They ask for an audience. Sansa opened the letter, her brow furrowing as she read. It's Lord Royce. He proposes a summit, Winterfell, River Run, White Harbor, the Eyrie and Old Town. Not just for trade, but for law. He wants to set a new code, binding for all who sign. Tyrion took the letter, turning it over in his hands. If we mean for this peace to outlast us, Sansa, this is how it begins. Not with swords, but with words that can bind stronger than any oath. She nodded, the resolve brightening her eyes. Send the ravens. Tell them Winterfell welcomes them. Preparations began at once. The next weeks were a blur. Chambers aired and tapestries hung. Cellars stocked. Wagons of hay and sacks of flour ferried in from every holdfast. The castle swelled with visitors, the air full of southern perfume, and the rich, earthy musk of mountain firs. The halls rang with a dozen accents, the yards crowded with unfamiliar banners and retinues. When the day came, the Godswood was chosen for the first council. Beneath the weirwood, with its red sap and pale, wise face, Sansa welcomed the lords of the realm. Royce, stout as an oak. Glover and Manderley, dour but hopeful. Tarly of Hornhill, his gaze cool but open. The new maester of Old Town, quick of wit and keen of mind. Lady Yara, her laughter echoing in the hush. And Arya, as ever, both. Tyrion stood at Sansa's side as she opened the gathering. Her voice carried through the wood, measured and steady. We have known war. We have seen the price of pride and vengeance. Let us build something stronger. Laws so that every man and woman can know justice. Trade so that no child starves. Friendship so that we need not fear the night. They debated for days, arguments as fierce as any battle. But the air was different now. Less suspicion, more curiosity, even warmth. Tyrion argued for the rights of the small folk, Sansa for the sanctity of northern custom, Royce for the old traditions of the Vale. Tarly, stern but fair, pressed for written codes, to be kept and taught by every maester in the land. Arya, restless, rode out each evening and returned at dawn with news of the mood among the people. Yara and Edmure Tully shared tales of old alliances, and Bran, when he spoke, did so with the clarity of water in winter, seeing past and future at once. On the final night, they gathered in the great hall. Wine flowed, music soared, and beneath the high rafters, old enemies toasted each other as friends. Sansa stood to address them, her hand in Tyrion's. We have written our law, and with it, our future. Let us hold to it, even when it is hard. Let us remember this night, when wolf, lion, trout, and eagle feasted together, not as rivals, but as kin. Then, The toast was taken up with a roar, and the laughter lasted long into the night. When the guests departed, the castle felt changed, not smaller, but greater, as if the stones themselves remembered what had passed and took heart from it. The new law was copied and sent to every keep and village, the words spreading like seeds. Winter settled in earnest after that, the snows piling higher, the days growing short and sharp. Tyrion found the rhythm of the cold comforting, mornings spent with Sansa at council, afternoons with the children in the library, evenings beside the fire with Arya and Bran, sharing old tales and new plans. In that deep winter, a son was born to Sansa and Tyrion. A boy with his mother's red hair and his father's clever eyes. The child's first cry was met with joy throughout Winterfell, and when he was presented to the Godswood, every lord and lady in attendance swore oaths to guard and cherish him. Arya laughed and proclaimed him the only Lannister to truly belong to the North. The boy grew strong and quick, toddling through the corridors, babbling in two tongues. Sansa named him Eddard, for the father she had lost, and Tyrion taught him to laugh and to question, to love books and horses, stories and snow. As the snows melted and spring teased the edge of the world, news came from the south. A threat, a rising lord in the old Targaryen lands, calling banners with whispers of dragon blood and lost birthrights. Tyrion met Sansa in the Godswood, the boy asleep in his arms, and together they listened to Arya's report. "They're gathering men," Arya said, voice cool and certain. "But they are divided. Half want the old ways. Half want peace. They fear what we've built more than they envy it." Sansa nodded. "Then we show them strength and offer peace again. Always peace, but never weakness." Tyrion smiled at his wife, pride and hope in his gaze. "And if they come for us," Arya's hand fell to her sword, "then the North will remind them what winter means." Spring broke at last, the rivers swelling, the banners snapping fresh and bright on the walls. Eddard ran through the courtyard, Arya chasing him, laughter mingling with the new birdsong. Tyrion stood on the ramparts beside Sansa, the wind tugging at their cloaks, and watched the land stretch wide and green before them. They had rebuilt not only a house, or a castle, or a city, but a realm, a place where the old names meant something new, and where the children of Lannister and Stark would grow up unafraid, surrounded by allies instead of enemies. He looked at Sansa and saw not just the woman he loved, but the future they had forged together, one day, one hard choice at a time. The realm would not be without storms, nor the peace without its trials. But for now, the sun rose over Winterfell, and the world felt full of promise. And in the years to come, when Eddard would ride through the gates at dawn, red hair blazing and laughter trailing, the people would remember these days. The days when Tyrion Lannister and Sansa Stark made the North the heart of a new Westeros, and taught even the proudest lion to live in peace among wolves. Ika. Bengdinda. Dawn came with a red flush over the snows, the last shreds of winter clinging to the shade of the old walls and the hollows of the Godswood. Smoke curled from every chimney in Winterfell, and from the south road came the sound of approaching wheels and horses, more envoys, more guests. In the space of a few short years, the castle that had been a battered redoubt against the night had become the crossroads of a new realm, a place where banners of blue, gold, and green jostled for space beside the gray dire wolf and the lion of Lannister. Tyrion stood in the yard with Eddard perched on his hip, the boy's hair a copper fire in the cold. He pointed out each banner to his son, naming houses, telling stories. The Corvid of House Reed, the crowned stag of Baratheon, the two towers of Frey, though that last he gave a little less color, mindful of old wounds that still ached in the north. Eddard listened with wide, sharp eyes, and when he babbled a word that sounded half like lion, Tyrion's heart twisted with pride. Sansa found them there, wrapped in a mantle of white, her cheeks ruddy with cold and her eyes bright with purpose. The news she brought was good. The riders from Old Town had made excellent time and would arrive before noon. The summit, now nearly a tradition, would begin with a harvest feast. Sansa pressed a kiss to her son's brow, then to Tyrion's, her hand lingering at his shoulder. "You tell too many stories," she teased, but her eyes shone. They went together to the gatehouse as the guests began to arrive. Lady Yara rode at the head of her Ironborn. A little grayer, a little softer for her years in the north, but still the same indomitable presence. Edmure arrived next, waving from a sled drawn by shaggy northern ponies, flanked by his riverlords and the first of many barrels of new ale. From the Vale came Lord Royce and his son, the latter riding with less awkwardness each year, a credit to the winters had endured in the north. And from the Reach, garbed in green and gold, rode the Lady of Highgarden herself, her train ablaze with laughter and perfume. The feast was held in the great hall, every table heaped with the bounty of 3 realms, roast venison, river trout baked with leeks, wheels of soft white cheese, honeyed apples, and spiced turnips. There were toasts and music, and even a troupe of mummers from White Harbor, their play a farcical retelling of the long night that ended, at Tyrion's direction, with laughter rather than terror. When the children were sent off to their beds, the council gathered by the fire. The old maps spread on the tables, goblets in hand. Sansa presided, her gaze steady. Tyrion at her right. The others took their places, Yara with her boots propped on a footstool, Royce sitting ramrod straight, Edmure already peeling apart a crust of bread, and the Lady of Highgarden with her ever-present glass of arbor gold. The summit's business was familiar. Trade and law, the policing of borders, the further opening of roads. A minor lord from the Crownlands, young, nervous, ambitious, proposed a network of messengers, quick riders and raveners to connect even the most distant holdfasts. Royce countered with a plan for a standing council to manage the effort, and Sansa saw it through, weaving their proposals together as if she had been born for this kind of work. Tyrion watched her and felt a surge of quiet awe. When the talk turned to the university at White Harbor, he spoke with the confidence of a man who had once been dismissed as nothing more than a clever joke. The Reach would send their best gardeners and scholars, Old Town, their healers and priests. Even Yara agreed to ship in books from the ruined halls of Pike. As the fire died low and the council drifted apart, Tyrion lingered, talking softly with Royce and the Lady of Highgarden. Their words wound through trade and tariffs, but always the same underlying theme returned: stability, trust, the need to nurture what had been so painfully rebuilt. He left them at last, finding Sansa alone in the solar, Eddard asleep in her lap. She looked up as he entered. Exhaustion and contentment mingled on her face. "They will ask more of us," she murmured, stroking the boy's hair. "Always more. There will always be another threat, another alliance to shape." "Menansai." Tyrion crouched at her side, his hand resting atop hers. "That is what it means to rule well," he said softly. "To keep building, one stone at a time, even when the world seems determined to shake it all apart." She smiled, a little ruefully. "It's what my father would have wanted. He always said the work was never truly done." They sat together in the hush. The only sound the boys even breathing, the faint pop of sap in the hearth. For a while, that was enough. When the last of the guests had gone and the banners were rolled away, Tyrion found himself again on the battlements at dawn, Eddard at his side. The boy, nearly 3 now, was tireless, his questions unending, his energy undimmed. Tyrion answered as best he could, sometimes with the truth, sometimes with a story, always careful to show the world as a place of wonder, not only of danger. The seasons turned, the first green creeping back over the hills, the river swelling with meltwater. News from the south spoke of a rising peace. The fires of rebellion banked for the moment. Arya returned from a journey through the Westerlands, bringing gifts and stories. She'd watched as old gold mines reopened, the wealth put not to armies but to rebuilding roads and schools. A few even named for Tyrion, though the miners still preferred their own tales about the imp who once bested dragons with words alone. There was unrest from time to time, raiders from beyond the wall, a dry summer in the Barrowlands, a fever that swept through the camps near White Harbor. Each crisis tested what they'd built, and each time Sansa called the council, the lords answered. They sent food, healers, Steel when needed. Never waiting for command. Trust grew, layer upon careful layer. Tyrion watched his son race through the yard, chasing a direwolf pup, Arya urging them both on with her wild laughter. He remembered a time when such joy would have seemed a cruel jest, a Lannister child at play with wolves. Now, it was simply the way of things. As the years rolled on, the university at White Harbor opened its doors. The children of lords and farmers alike came to study, to learn crafts and histories, to argue and to dream. Sansa made a habit of visiting twice each year, her presence a promise that even the greatest halls could belong to the smallest voices. Tyrion lectured sometimes, on law, on history, on the old battles had fought with ink and wit instead of steel. He taught his son to read, to ride, to question everything, to see the realm not only as it was, but as it might be. Peace, hard won, never felt permanent, but it became familiar. Banners from the Eyrie, from the Stormlands, from the ports of Dorne and even the Iron Islands, came to Winterfell as to a heart, each beating for a realm that was at last learning to live with itself. The children who'd once huddled behind walls grew into adults unafraid to look beyond the old enmities. The first time, Tyrion saw Eddard arm himself for the training yard. A sword that was more a toy than a weapon. A shield painted with the wolf and the lion entwined. He felt something like completion, and something like fear. The work was never finished. But now, at least, the children started from a place of hope. Sansa grew only more beautiful, her strength maturing into a confidence that radiated from her in council, in the markets, among the people. They rode out together, often with Arya or Yara or Edmure, to the farthest villages and keeps. Everywhere they went, they found echoes of themselves, survivors, builders, storytellers, each determined that what had been won at such cost would not be lost for want of vigilance. The stories grew, as stories do. The mummers' plays became more extravagant, the children's songs bolder and more hopeful. Some remembered the days when Lannister gold was a curse in the north, when Sansa's name was a byword for sorrow. Now the tales had changed. A clever lion, a wolf with eyes like dawn, a world reborn in winter's heart. One night, as snow again began to fall, and Tyrion stood at the window with Sansa at his side, Eddard already asleep in the adjoining room, he found himself thinking back to the first days, when peace seemed an illusion, and trust a foolish dream. "We have come far," he said. Sansa looked out across the snowy roofs, her hand resting lightly on his. "There is farther yet to go." "Always," Tyrion agreed. "But now, at least, we walk together." She smiled, pressing her cheek to his shoulder, contentment and determination mingling in her eyes. Let it be enough for tonight. The snow deepened, softening the world, turning Winterfell's towers to white sentinels in the night. Somewhere in the darkness a wolf howled, and another answered, and inside the keep laughter drifted through the halls. Tyrion closed his eyes and listened, the peace of it settling deep. The north, and the realm beyond, was not safe from change or sorrow, but for a time it was at peace, its heart beating steady beneath banners new and old, its promise held in the small hands of the next generation. And as the world turned, Tyrion Lannister, once despised, now beloved, watched over it all, partner, father, friend, and knew at last what it meant to belong. Ka. Summer's return to the north was never brash. It came on silent feet. First a lifting of the perpetual gray, the sky pale and translucent as fresh milk, then a gentle softening of the river ice, a delicate chorus of meltwater singing beneath the bridge stones. Winterfell awoke slowly, its ancient stones holding chill, even as the first gold flared on the distant hills. Tyrion marked the change in the light that spilled across Sansa's sleeping face, in the restlessness of the children, in the lengthening shadows that pooled by evening in the Godswood. Each year, the festival of first planting marked the truest sign that the old scars were healing. The lords and ladies, the villagers and their children, all gathered in the outer field as Sansa and Tyrion together sowed a furrow of winter wheat. Edmure brought a keg of river ale and a string of silly songs. Arya raced the young squires across the field, always letting herself lose in the last sprint. laughter echoing. Yara stood watchful at the edge, arms folded, her eyes narrowed not in suspicion, but in the new habit of care. Bran, attended by 2 loyal ravens, observed from his chair, a faint smile haunting his lips. Tyrion knelt in the earth, feeling the rich dark loam between his fingers, Sansa at his side. He thought of his father, of gold and war, of the ruined stones of Lannisport. He thought of the children clustered around them. Eddard, whose cheeks were already dusted with freckles, and whose mind absorbed stories with frightening hunger. Little Lyanna, the girl Arya had coaxed from a wildling village beyond the wall. Now as much Stark as any born within these walls. Sansa pressed a handful of seeds into his palm, and they worked side by side, surrounded by the people who had made peace possible, each step a rebuke to the endless cold. The days followed a rhythm that was both new and very old. Each morning, Tyrion and Sansa convened their small council. Glover, Manderly, Yara, Edmure, now a fixture in the north, each gave their reports. Each watched the horizon for trouble, but none could claim the urgency of the past. The roads to the south were open and safe. Maesters journeyed up the White Knife with satchels of letters and news from Old Town and beyond. The wildlings sent fur and news of the far ice, and the trade ships from the Iron Islands returned with barrels of fish, and sometimes rumors of storms. After council, Tyrion often took Eddard with him through the village streets. The boy walked with the measured dignity of a prince, but his laughter was honest, and he greeted every dog and goat as if it were a lord in its own right. Tyrion listened to the complaints of the bakers and the fishwives, never forgetting the value of small words in the building of great peace. Sometimes he recounted a story to a knot of children, or taught them a riddle, the kind his brother Jaime would have failed and Cersei would have scorned. Afternoons were reserved for the work of law and letters. Tyrion read missives from the Reach, from the Vale, even from Dorne, where the new princess, just out of childhood herself, sent honey and polite, careful questions about how to settle old blood feuds. Tyrion replied with advice and a tale or two, never lecturing, always inviting curiosity. With each parchment sent, the North's influence spread, not as a conqueror's shadow, but as an invitation to a different kind of strength. At Sansa's urging, the next great council was planned, not for Winterfell, but for White Harbor, so the South could see how far the North had come and how much it had to offer. Tyrion traveled with her, Eddard and Lyanna, and a small retinue, down the King's Road made smooth again by years of honest labor. Arya rode ahead, sometimes vanishing for days, always returning with fresh cheeks and wild tales. White Harbor's new university gleamed above the city, its stonework bright, its halls filled with the scents of wax and vellum, tallow and spiced wine. Lords and scholars arrived from every corner of the realm, maesters from Old Town, Lady Yara, with 2 of her most promising sailors. Edmure bringing a delegation of river engineers eager to learn the Reach secrets of irrigation. Even the Stormland sent a lord's heir, eager and awkward, curious in a way Tyrion remembered from his own youth. The council convened beneath colored banners and lanterns, the university's great hall echoing with voices and laughter. Sansa, regal and serene, greeted each guest as an equal. Tyrion poured wine, made introductions, spun tales that drew together the knots of awkwardness that lingered between regions, still learning to trust. Discussions ranged from road building to the governance of ports, from the common laws of trade to the creation of a new body of healers. Northern wisdom blended with Southern scholarship, wildling knowledge woven with the customs of Old Town and Dorne. Eddard ran among the children, highborn and smallfolk, maesters' apprentices and fishmongers' sons. All of them joined in games Arya invented on the spot. The boy listened with wide eyes as a Reach woman told him of sun-drenched vineyards, then repeated the story that night to Lyanna, who responded with a tale of ice caves and singing wolves. The next day, Sansa found them both on the university green, surrounded by a circle of children, spinning stories and arguments with a kind of gentle authority that was wholly their own. During the evenings, Tyrion wandered the harbor, watching the ships bob at anchor, the lanterns winking in the dusk. Sometimes Yara joined him, her face thoughtful. "You've made something here," she observed, her tone half wonder, Half challenge. Not alone, Tyrion replied. The best things are never built alone. Yara's eyes flickered. Even so, most would have built a throne, not a council. Thrones can be stolen, he said, or broken or burned. But an idea can outlast us all. She laughed at that, the sound rolling across the water, and for a moment, Tyrion thought he might finally have earned the Ironborn's full respect. After the council's close, the delegation returned to Winterfell. Summer was in full strength now. The days long, the air sweet with the scent of growing things. The orchards, planted in the first uneasy spring after the long night, were finally bearing fruit. Sansa and Tyrion walked beneath branches heavy with apples, Eddard on Tyrion's shoulders, Lyanna skipping ahead to collect the first windfalls. It was on such an evening that Arya returned, dust on her boots, her eyes bright with mischief. She brought with her a letter from Dorne, a proposal that the princess and Eddard, once grown, might foster in one another's courts, binding the peace in a new and living way. Sansa's eyes glistened as she read it, and for a long while she and Tyrion stood together in the orchard, watching the children at play. They will have a different world, Sansa said softly. Tyrion nodded. They must. It's why we endured so much for so long. And all, there were still challenges, still old tempers that flared. Once, a winter sickness swept through the holdfasts, and Tyrion and Sansa rode out with healers and stores of grain. Another year, a fire broke out at the university, but was quickly subdued by a bucket line manned by lords and small folk alike. Each crisis reminded them that peace was a living thing, requiring care and vigilance. In those years, Tyrion's hair thinned, his gait slowed. He felt the weight of time, but never resented it. He watched Eddard and Lyanna grow into their strength. He saw Arya mentor a new generation of scouts and wardens. He watched Sansa command the loyalty of her people with a gentleness that belied the iron at her core. On the eve of another harvest, as the fires burned in every hearth and laughter rolled from the kitchens to the ramparts, Tyrion found himself once again in the Godswood, this time with Sansa at his side and their children, now nearly grown, standing in the lamplight. Bran's chair was empty, but the birds in the branches sang in the dusk, and Tyrion thought of all the stories, all the dangers and hopes that had led to this moment. Sansa laid her head on his shoulder, and for a time, neither spoke. There was nothing to say but everything. And in that silence, Tyrion knew that their greatest work was not the peace itself, but the hearts that had learned to trust in it, to defend it, to pass it on. The bells of Winterfell rang out across the night, calling the people to another feast, another memory, another year of building something stronger than any sword or castle wall. Tyrion turned to Sansa and smiled, his eyes full of the years behind and the hope ahead. "Shall we, my lady?" he said, offering his arm. She took it, her smile radiant, and together they stepped forward into the glow of Winterfell's lights, the warmth of laughter and song, the promise of a summer finally come home to the north. Inda, nine, cow. They woke one morning to the roar of rain against the leaded windows, thunder rolling across the wide sky in deep, measured beats. The north had waited for this, the long, slow drink, after a summer of generous sun and steady wind, a rain to swell the rivers and green the meadows, before the first hint of frost. Tyrion stood at the window with Eddard perched atop a stool beside him, both father and son watching the storm, faces lit with the same curious intelligence. Winterfell itself seemed to welcome the storm. Water poured from gargoyle mouths, filled every stone basin, and hammered the training yard until even the bravest hound retreated beneath the eaves. The small folk went about their tasks with laughter, children dancing barefoot in the mud. Sansa moved from hall to hall, shawl trailing, her voice mingling with the rush and patter, asking after old men's joints, newborn calves, the coming apples, her presence a warmth the north had learned to trust. Inside, the castle was alive with its own weather. The kitchen steamed, the air rich with the scents of honey, yeast, and onions. Lords' children, joined by apprentices and wildling kin, sprawled on carpets in the solar to play Sivas. Maester Walken presided over a game, Eddard and Lyanna jostling for advantage. Lyanna bold and quick, Eddard cautious but clever, each move more thoughtful than the last. Tyrion watched with wry approval, hearing his own strategies echoed in his son's mutterings and seeing Arya's fearless confidence in Lyanna's darting hands. Arya herself strode in soon after, cheeks bright, boots wet, hair damp and wild about her shoulders. The bridges held, she announced to Sansa and Tyrion both, flopping beside the children. Floodwater's no match for a decent wall and the will to keep it standing. How's the game? I'm winning, Lyanna declared. You're not, Eddard objected, brow furrowed. Arya grinned and swept Lyanna onto her lap, letting Eddard retake his move, her eyes darting up to Sansa Datall. The guards along the King's Road are asking about next week's caravan. The last of the grain from Old Town's come through the Mander. No trouble this time, but a few southern traders are grumbling about tolls and tariffs. Sansa exchanged a glance with Tyrion. We'll set a hearing after the council. Let them air their grievances. If the river lords want to trade at northern prices, they'll have to learn northern patience. Or northern hospitality, Tyrion murmured, lips twitching. If we serve them enough ale, their memories might prove as short as their tempers. Eddard giggled. Lyanna made a face, and Arya cuffed Tyrion's shoulder in mock scorn. If you teach them too well, we'll have nothing but clever merchants and sly lords. That's the world you helped build, little sister, Tyrion said, feigning a bow. A realm of reason and jest, not daggers and whispers. Better this than the old ways, Sansa answered, her gaze soft. Tyrion lingered beside the hearth as the day grew dark, watching flames reflected in the rain-splattered windows. The council gathered by midday, each lord and lady, arriving in furs and dripping cloaks, their boots leaving muddy prints on the flagstones. Yara arrived last, shaking water from her hair, her ward grown into a broad-shouldered youth with a northern accent and a sailor's stride. Glover and Manderly traded stories about failed harvests in their youth, now grumbling good-naturedly over surplus. Edmure reported the riverlands flush with fish and green fields. Lady Highgarden's representative, a keen-eyed girl with a Tyrell smile, brought samples of new grafted apples, tart and crisp, and promised a shipment of wine before the first frost. Sansa opened the meeting. The grain tariffs are high enough for comfort, but not so high as to choke the trade. Our stores are strong. Our people are well fed. The first of the southern caravans has arrived at White Harbor, and more are coming by ship. With this rain, the autumn planting should flourish. Manderly spoke of river silt and a new scheme for using waste as fertilizer. Glover, eager to outdo him, outlined a plan for teaching wildlings to rotate crops. Arya added that a band of free folk had requested to settle a new hamlet south of the last river, willing to pay their share of the tithe in smoked salmon and furs. No one objected. When the question of southern tariffs arose, Tyrion suggested a trial. 2 months with the current rate, then a review by a council of merchants and lords together. Let those who buy and those who sell learn what compromise means, he said. If a southern merchant can't profit, hell leave. If the north gets greedy, the markets will empty. Balance is the thing. Yaris Ward, now a young man, spoke up shyly about a problem at the docks. Too many ships waiting for too few harbor masters. Arya promised to look into it herself, and Sansa proposed a school for training new officers, to be funded jointly by the Iron Islands and White Harbor. Through it all, the mood was lighter than it had ever been. They disagreed, they argued. But the old bitterness was gone, replaced by a sense of shared investment. Each lord and lady saw not only their own interests, but the health of the realm as a whole. A slow miracle wrought of patient effort. When the council adjourned, Tyrion found Sansa in the garden. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and the air was sweet with wet grass and the promise of apples. She leaned against a birch tree, arms folded, her face raised to the light. "You're thinking," he observed. "Always," she smiled. "But this time it's mostly hope. Do you realize how rare that is, even now?" He nodded, joining her. "Hope is the rarest thing of all. We have to protect it." And then Sansa took his hand. "We will. Together." As the day shortened and the harvest festival neared, preparations filled the castle. Eddard and Lyanna were charged with decorating the hall, garlands of dried wheat and apple boughs, banners painted with both direwolf and lion, the stag of Baratheon and the kraken of Greyjoy. Arya led the children in carving lanterns from turnips and pumpkins, their laughter rising as they competed for the fiercest face. In the kitchens, Manderly's cooks and Tyrell's bakers traded recipes, filling the cellars with new breads and sweetmeats. On the eve of the festival, the first snows drifted in, catching the last yellow leaves and softening the edge of the world. Tyrion and Sansa stood at the window together, watching the lights flicker across the bailey. "Are you content?" she asked. "I am," he replied. "More than I thought possible." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched Eddard and Lyanna dance below, their faces alight, their world unmarred by old hatreds. The next day, Winterfell glowed with life. People came from every corner, lords and crofters, wildlings and smallfolk, septons and maesters, even a party from Dorne. The feast spilled from the hall into the yard, where casks of wine and cider were broached. Music played, and children darted beneath the tables. Eddard was everywhere at once, Lyanna not far behind, Arya cheering them both. In the heart of it, Tyrion lifted a cup and raised his voice for all to hear. "When I first came to the north, I was a stranger, suspect, unwelcome, a Lannister among wolves. Yet, you gave me shelter. You gave me purpose. I stand before you not only as your lord's consort, nor even as a father, but as a brother to you all. Together we have made a peace that is as real as these stones, as warm as this fire. May it endure as long as memory." The cheer that followed rang against the walls and out across the fields, up to the ramparts where sentries smiled at the sound, and even to the wild woods where the wolves howled their own reply. Later, Sansa found Tyrion beneath the weirwood, the night silent, save for the slow fall of snow. "We are strong," she said, "stronger than I dared hope." He drew her close. "Because we remember, because we forgive, and because we love," she whispered, her voice fierce as the wind. As the snows deepened and the realm settled once more into the rhythm of winter, Tyrion looked out at all they had built and knew it would not last forever. Nothing ever did. But for a season, perhaps for many, the North was at peace. Its children sleeping safe, its people full of hope. And that, he thought as Sansa's hand found his in the dark, was enough. Okay. As winter deepened, the snow grew thick and stubborn across the land, swirling in great white eddies past the ramparts of Winterfell, and collecting in every crevice, every courtyard, blanketing the castle in silence. The world seemed to slow its breath, as if pausing to savor the warmth that pulsed within the ancient walls. Yet inside, life burned bright as ever. Smoke curled from every chimney. The smells of roasting meats and baking bread filled the halls. Every hearth was heaped high, every storeroom well stocked against the cold. Tyrion found himself waking before dawn most mornings, padding softly through corridors muffled with rushes and old tapestries. He relished these hours, the castle sleeping but for the servants stoking fires or the watchmen stamping cold from their boots on the battlements. He would pour himself a mug of hot spiced wine, breathe in the cinnamon and clove, and look out over the snowy roofs, the low lantern glow on the snow, the shifting shadows as the wind swept through the outer walls. Some mornings, Sansa joined him. She'd stand at his side, her hair copper gleam even in the candlelight, her presence quiet but certain. They spoke of little things, memories of summers past, the antics of the children, the antics of the small folk in the village, a particularly fine loaf of bread, a wildling tale from Arya, a report of a rare bird sighted near the Godswood. These small private rituals wove a thread of comfort through the coldest months. Eddard and Lyanna, both nearly grown now, filled the castle with their voices. Eddard's questions had grown more complex. Now he pressed Tyrion for answers on trade and law, on why bannermen feuded, and why some oaths could not be kept. Lyanna preferred to ask Arya about swords and justice, riding out with the wildlings or hunting in the Wolfswood, always returning with windburned cheeks and new secrets. The two were inseparable, a Stark and a Lannister in the blood but kin in the ways that truly mattered. watched over by the whole of Winterfell's household, as if the safety of the realm itself lay in their hands. One afternoon, Tyrion found the pair in the library, surrounded by ledgers, old maps, and a pile of histories. Eddard frowning thoughtfully, Lyanna impatiently tapping her fingers against a page. "I don't see why anyone would ever choose to fight when they could talk," Eddard said. "Look how much simpler things have become since the laws were agreed at White Harbor." Lyanna snorted. "You weren't there when the wildlings first came south. You didn't see the look in Glover's eye." Tyrion smiled. "You're both right, in your ways. Peace is work. Constant, patient work. It's not always won by clever words. And it's never finished. But the more you talk, the less you bleed. Remember that." Eddard nodded, and Lyanna grinned, her eyes bright with understanding. The castle bustled with winter projects. The smithy rang with the sound of tools and the hiss of steel. Seamstresses and weavers spun thick cloaks for the coming year. In the kitchens, Manderley's cooks worked side by side with those sent up from Highgarden, trading recipes for fish pie and lemon cakes, filling the larders with treats for the leanest days. Yaras Ward, now a grown man, trained harbor officers in White Harbor and returned often to feast with his second family, bringing with him tidings of calm seas and honest trade. Arya traveled more than ever. Her wild spirit undimmed by the cold. She rode east as an envoy to the Vale and south to the Riverlands, ensuring the laws agreed upon at White Harbor were honored. Her reputation was legend now, a wolf who appeared where needed and vanished as swiftly, the steel of her name as sharp as any blade. She returned with stories and gifts for the children. Fine knives from Sunspear, stories of the Water Gardens, a scroll penned by the Princess of Dorne herself. At council, the talk was practical, warm, and often lively. Grain was plentiful. Wildlings had settled 3 new villages, the first true hamlets beyond the wall. Sickness, when it came, was met with well-trained healers and stores of dried herbs and honey, sent north by both Stark and Tyrell hands. Sansa presided, her poise and clarity the anchor for every debate. Tyrion, ever the voice of reason, weighed each proposal with the hard-earned patience of a man who had seen too much to waste time on pride. One morning, as the sun barely touched the highest spires, a raven arrived from Old Town. The Maesters had agreed to a new library, to be built at the university in White Harbor. A collection of all the laws and customs of the land, written in both the common tongue and the old northern runes. Tyrion read the letter aloud at breakfast, and the table broke into applause. "This will outlast us all," he said softly, and Sansa squeezed his hand beneath the board. The old enmities faded. Once, a brawl broke out between 2 merchant families, one from the Reach, one from the north. But it was settled not by swords, but by a debate judged by Eddard and Lyanna, who pronounced a decision so balanced that both families declared it fair. At the next festival, both families sent their children to dance together, and the hall rang with music until dawn. As winter waned, a letter arrived from Dorne, confirming the fosterage of the princess and young Eddard. Tyrion felt a pang of pride, and a sudden, unexpected ache of loss. Sansa noticed and drew him aside. "He'll come home," she said gently, "and he'll bring the world with him." "I know," Tyrion replied. "I only wish the world were always as gentle as it is here." Sansa smiled. "It isn't, but he's your son. He'll shape it as you have." The day of Eddard's departure came on a morning of hard blue sky and glittering snow. The whole castle turned out to see the party off. Sansa in white and gray, Arya with a wildling wolf at her side, Lyanna holding Eddard's hand. Tyrion, dressed in a fine black cloak trimmed with silver, hugged his son and whispered words only they would remember. The party rode out beneath banners of wolf and sun, the road alive with possibility. That night, Winterfell felt strangely quiet. Tyrion and Sansa dined in the solar, candles flickering, snow falling softly outside. They spoke of their son, of his future, of the years behind, and the years still to come. They did not speak of endings. Not tonight. The seasons turned. The work of peace continued. New laws, new treaties, a school for healers, a guild for the weavers, a feast every midwinter. Each year, More banners joined those in the hall. Word of Eddard's success in Dorne reached them. Tales of his wisdom and quick tongue, his fairness in council, his laughter among the dunes. Lyanna, meanwhile, grew into her own legend. A huntress and leader whose word carried weight from Winterfell to the furthest outposts. Through it all, Sansa and Tyrion endured, partners, rulers, companions. Their hair turned silver at the temples, their steps slower, but their bond only deepened. In every crisis, Sansa's calm and Tyrion's wit guided the north. In every celebration, their joy made the castle blaze with life. And when, one spring, Eddard returned, taller, sun-darkened, a man in his own right, he came with gifts from the south and news of friends and alliances, of a realm that had learned to live in peace. That night, as the castle feasted, Tyrion stood beside Sansa beneath the lanterns of the godswood, the air rich with the scent of thawing earth. He listened to the laughter, the song, the thunder of children's feet, and knew that what they had built would not last forever. But for this night, and perhaps for many more, the north was whole and at peace, its future bright as the stars wheeling above. He looked to Sansa, and she to him, and in their eyes was the promise they had kept, the hope that would pass on. And in that moment, as winter melted from the world, Tyrion Lannister was content. Oh, how! Spring's breath found every seam in Winterfell, drawing the ancient chill from the stones. The snows melted in steady unseen trickles, unveiling the green ghosts of last summer's grass and the black bones of apple trees just beginning to bud. Life returned in fits and starts. The snap of sheets on lines strung from tower to tower, the startled laughter of children as they chased each other along muddy paths, the first wildflowers pushing up through thaw-soft earth by the godswood's roots. Tyrion felt it all in his bones, the promise of newness and renewal, the lightning of the spirit that came when the north threw off winter's last grip. He rose before dawn, his breath no longer misting in the corridors. He dressed in his oldest, softest shirt, and carried his boots through the quiet halls, until he found Sansa in the solar. She stood by the open window, hair loose, face to the sunrise, her expression so unguarded he dared not disturb her with speech. Instead, he leaned on the window ledge beside her and listened to the distant calls of ravens and the echo of hooves on thawed stone. Sansa turned at last, her eyes reflecting the pink and gold of morning. "He's nearly grown," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Tyrion nodded. He thought of Eddard. Sun-browned, clever, a bridge between north and south, a link between past and future. He thought of Lyanna, so fierce and so wild, her laughter echoing Arya's, her courage unyielding. "They're the world we never knew we could give," he said, and Sansa's hand found his, small and warm. The castle was waking. Arya returned from her latest journey south, her hair wind-tangled and her eyes shining. She brought stories of Dorne's blooming groves and the new university's bustling halls, of Eddard's mediation between quarrelsome lords, and of Lyanna's wild hunt through the Kingswood. Her archery praised in every port. Arya's own renown had only grown. She was called the North's Blade now, an ambassador no one dared cross and a friend to the lost. Bran sent ravens, one from Old Town, where a conclave of maesters had invited Winterfell's healers to speak on the arts of treating frostbite and summer fever. Another from the Vale, where Lord Royce's grandson sought to court Lyanna. Each letter a thread, a mark of how deeply their new world was knitted together. White Harbor's university flourished. Its library grew, fed by manuscripts sent from the Citadel, Dorne, even from Braavos and the Summer Isles. Maesters, healers, and scholars, women and men, wildlings and smallfolk, came north to study, to teach, to begin anew. Tyrion visited each year, lecturing on law, history, and the lessons of power. He was a living legend now, and his words found root in the young hearts before him. Sansa traveled more, always with Tyrion beside her or Arya ranging ahead. In White Harbor she was welcomed as a queen, in the Riverlands as a daughter come home, in the Vale as a wise cousin and a peacemaker. The Stormlands sent envoys, cautious, respectful, offering salt and bread. In Dorne, The princess received her with roses and lemons, and old songs were sung beneath the citrus boughs. Each journey further stitched the realm's wounds. Each year broadened the circle of their peace. In Winterfell, Sansa and Tyrion oversaw a court that was open and fair, where law was given as much weight as lineage. Disputes between wildling and northern, between trader and craftsman, were judged in the open, Lyanna often presiding, Arya serving as champion, when a question demanded courage as well as wisdom. The people trusted their rulers not because of banners, but because justice had been made a living thing, daily tended like the godswood's heart tree. One spring morning, as the sun chased the last rags of mist from the fields, a new challenge arrived. A messenger from beyond the wall, an old wildling with white in his beard and the blue beads of his people at his throat. He asked for audience with Sansa and Tyrion, bearing a plea from the clans of the far north. "The ice is moving," he said, voice hoarse from travel. "There are things waking in the deep. We have seen lights, felt the earth shake, lost game that never returned. We seek help, knowledge, trade, a pact as old as stories." Sansa summoned her council. Tyrion listened to the tales, weighing each word. Some of the lords grumbled, old suspicions, old fears. But Arya stood, one hand on Lyanna's shoulder, and spoke with all the force of the North's memory. "We faced the long night and lived. If there is another threat, we must face it as one realm, not divided." It was agreed. A party would travel north beyond the wall, led by Arya, Lyanna, and a handful of trusted rangers. Tyrion spent nights with the wildling envoys, trading stories and learning the old names for ice, for hunger, for the shifting lights that haunted the northern sky. He sent for scholars from the university, and together they pored over ancient texts, looking for any sign of what might wake in the deeps of the far north. Sansa oversaw the gathering of supplies. Food, furs, weapons for the journey, gifts of salt and steel and healing herbs. Eddard, now a man and home for the spring, offered to ride with his sister, but Sansa shook her head gently. "Your place is here for now," she told him. "The North cannot be left leaderless." Tyrion and Sansa watched the party ride out from the gate, Arya's dark hair streaming, Lyanna at her side, wildlings and wolves melting into the snow-shadowed wild. The whole castle stood to see them off. The people were quiet, their eyes full of old fears and new hope. Days passed, then weeks, the tension coiling tighter as news from the party trickled back. Of frost canyons and lost rivers, of northern lights that flickered like spirits in the night. Tyrion spent sleepless nights with maps and letters, conferring with Sansa, reassuring the lords, keeping peace in the small things so that they might meet the great. One night, the gate horn sounded, and the party returned. Arya thinner but unbroken, Lyanna leading the wildlings, their faces etched with fatigue and triumph. It was not the old darkness, Arya told the council. It was a movement of the world, ice falling, earth shifting, animals displaced, but there is nothing in the deep that lives, not now. The wildlings ask only for help and for trade, not for war. Lyanna stood beside her, her face fierce and proud. "We are stronger for what we did, together." The court breathed again. That night, a feast filled Winterfell. Wildling drums joined northern pipes. Children danced with wolf pups beneath the lanterns. Sansa stood beside Tyrion and watched their daughter laughing in the firelight, Arya's hand resting on her shoulder. "There will always be threats," Sansa said, voice steady and full. "But so long as we face them as one, I do not fear the darkness." Tyrion took her hand, feeling the truth of it in her pulse. In the solid world they had built, we have remade the realm, stone by stone. Let it last as long as the heart tree stands. Outside, the rain had washed the snows away, and green returned to the fields. The work of peace was never finished, but spring had come, true and bright and full of the hope they had sown together, a harvest not only for their children, but for all who called this place home. Winterfell stood strong in the dawn, its halls alive with laughter and love, its walls bearing not the weight of old vengeance, but the promise of what could be rebuilt when wolves and lions walked side by side beneath the sun. Oh, Ka. Summer pressed in golden and green over Winterfell's towers. The snow long vanished from the walls, and replaced by the ceaseless, cheerful chatter of birds and the steady murmur of running water. Rivers ran fat and quick from distant hills. The weirwood's leaves shimmered in thick canopies overhead, dappling the godswood in a living mosaic of light. Children's laughter echoed from the bailey, mingling with the thump of hammers, the clatter of hooves, the hiss and clang of steel from the smithy. Tyrion rose early, as was his habit in these years of contentment. His joints ached more than they once had, but he relished the creak and groan of his body, a proof of years well spent and hard-won peace. The world outside his window no longer threatened, but beckoned. Each day a new story to write upon it. He found Sansa in the lower gardens, kneeling among the herbs and wildflowers. Sunlight crowned her hair, catching on threads of silver that had begun to glimmer amid the copper. She looked up at his approach, smiling as if the years that had passed were nothing at all. "There's a bee trapped in the lavender," she said by way of greeting, her hands cupped gently around a bloom. "He's stubborn." Tyrion crouched beside her, watching the trembling wings. "Stubbornness is a northern virtue." "Is that why you've never left?" she asked, teasing, eyes full of warmth. He grinned. "That, and the climate. A Lannister can't abide the southern heat." She freed the bee, watched it buzz drunkenly into the blue, then wiped her hands and leaned against his shoulder. "They've sent word from Dorne. The princess is preparing to visit. She's bringing her brother and a full train of knights. Eddard will have his work cut out for him." Tyrion chuckled, thinking of his son, grown to manhood, but with none of the bitterness that had clung to so many heirs before him. Eddard was measured, clever, compassionate. A bridge between north and south, his laughter as easy in the great hall as in the saddle. He welcomed every challenge as if it were a new adventure, his eyes never narrowing in suspicion, but widening in curiosity. "Let him host," Tyrion said. "It's his turn. Let the realm see what the next generation can do." Sansa nodded. "He'll have Lyanna and Arya beside him. And you and I can sit together for once. Watch and remember." The days leading to the Dornish arrival were a flurry of preparation. The kitchen steamed. New banners were stitched and raised. Barrels of northern ale and Dornish wine stood side by side in the cool cellars. Tyrion wandered the yards, dispensing advice, encouragement, and the occasional wry remark. He caught Eddard one evening, pacing the ramparts with Lyanna, discussing which songs to play and where the Dornish guests should sleep. "You're ready," Tyrion told his son, seeing the nerves behind the confidence. "Trust yourself. The world will be watching, but they will see a Stark and a Lannister who does not flinch from peace." Eddard paused, gazing across the fields. "I hope I do you proud." "You already have," Tyrion said. "Now do yourself proud." The Princess of Dorne arrived in a blaze of color and song, banners fluttering, riders cloaked in oranges and golds, the sun bright on steel and silk. Her brother, lean and tall, was quick with a joke. The princess herself carried herself like a queen, but her laughter was infectious, her curiosity keen. The Dornish train brought warmth and spices, old stories and newer hopes. Eddard welcomed them at the gate with Lyanna and Arya, every inch the Lord of Winterfell, but with none of the stiffness of court. The feast that followed lasted deep into the night. There were songs in both tongues, dances from the far south. Cups passed from hand to hand until even the servants and guards joined in. Tyrion sat with Sansa beneath the banners, watching it all unfold, joy blooming at the heart of his contentment. For days, the castle was alive with celebration and exchange. The princess and her brother toured the university in White Harbor, marveling at the library, attending lectures, laughing with students who could hardly believe their company. Sansa and Tyrion joined them for a council in the Solar, where they spoke of new trade, salt for saffron, amber for wine, the open exchange of healers and artists. The council was easy, warm, full of possibility. In the yard, Lyanna and Arya sparred with Dornish knights, their matches drawing crowds of children who cheered every feint and laugh. At dusk, Eddard led the princess to the Godswood, where they knelt beneath the heart tree. She listened to the story of how winter had once nearly destroyed the world, and afterward she pressed her hand to the old bark and promised, "Dorne will stand with the North, whatever the season." The final night was marked by a gathering in the great hall. One part feast, one part council, one part play. Mummers told the tale of the long night, not as tragedy, but as a lesson, ending with a song in which wolf and lion and sun dancer all shared the fire. Children joined in, led by Arya, their laughter spilling through the doors into the cool night. As the guests departed, the bonds between their lands stronger than ever, Sansa leaned against Tyrion in the pre-dawn quiet of their bedchamber. "You have given them a gift," she whispered. "Not just peace, but a new story to tell." He brushed a hand through her hair. "We gave it together. Peace is a thing that can only be built with many hands." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I am glad it was your hands beside mine." The seasons spun onward. Eddard and the Dornish princess exchanged letters, first formal, then playful, then full of questions and the eager honesty of youth. Lyanna rode with Arya to the wildling villages, helping build a new hall on the edge of the world, teaching archery and law. Arya sometimes vanished for weeks, returning with a scar or a song, her spirit undimmed. Tyrion and Sansa walked the gardens, visited White Harbor, rode north to see the wildflowers bloom on the old battlefield, talking quietly of the past and the hopes that bloomed after every winter. As the years unfurled, the realm became what they had always imagined it could be, fractious at times, but always united in purpose. Harvests grew, the population swelled, and the scars of war faded into the stories the children learned beneath the heart tree and in the halls of the university. When Sansa's mother's necklace broke one evening, a chain of silver and lapis slipped from her neck as she read to her grandchildren. Tyrion sat at the table and restrung it, his old hands steady, his eyes misty with memory. He remembered all that had been lost and all that had been gained, and Sansa, watching him, saw not only the clever boy who had once outwitted kings and dragons, but the partner who had remade the world beside her. The first hint of autumn brought Eddard home, taller and leaner than before, the promise of a new alliance glowing in his eyes. He brought with him a letter from the Princess of Dorne, sealed in red wax and full of plans, of shared roads and joint harvests, of peace kept not by threat, but by custom, friendship, and trust. Lyanna was there to greet him, and Arya too, and the three embraced in the courtyard, the laughter of their reunion, a hymn to all that had been risked and all that had been won. That night, as the fires burned low, and the winds whispered through the apple trees, Sansa and Tyrion sat together in the Godswood, listening to the world they had made. "It will change again," Sansa murmured. "Children grow, storms come. Peace must be tended." Tyrion pressed her hand. "Let them come. We have given the North roots that run deeper than fear, deeper than winter. Whatever comes, they will weather it, together." The moon drifted behind the weirwood branches, and the stars burned steady overhead. In the hush between heartbeats, Tyrion felt the weight of years, the sharp ache of joy and the quiet grace of belonging. He rested his head on Sansa's shoulder, and together they sat in the deep heart of Winterfell, a little older, a little slower, but still strong as the old stones, still warmed by the future they had built, and the love they had grown through the seasons of their long, hard-won peace. The golden weeks of late summer hung over Winterfell, each morning bright and dew-soaked, the evenings long and heavy with the perfume of ripening apples and trampled grass. The world, for all its change, had settled into the familiar rhythms of harvest. From the fields came the rumble of wagons and the cries of farmers bringing in barley and oats. In the city beyond the walls, markets bloomed with color, bolts of wool and silk, barrels of cider and spiced wine, baskets overflowing with fruit from the southern reach, and wild berries from the frosted edge of the woods. Tyrion strolled through the courtyard at sunrise, savoring the weight of a day that would be busy but not fraught. He paused to watch Lyanna teaching a knot of wildling children how to braid leather, her laughter ringing out clear as she corrected a tangle or praised a clever twist. Arya, newly returned from a summer spent exploring the rocky coves of the western coast, leaned against the wall nearby, sharpening a new dagger and trading stories with an iron-born youth in the northern dialect. Eddard was nowhere to be seen, but Tyrion could hear the cadence of his voice from the open library window above. Teaching, always teaching, passing on what had learned to children eager to absorb the world. Sansa joined him before the council, a blue cloak sweeping the dust as she passed. Her face was serene, but he could see the alertness in her gaze. She had learned long ago never to trust too much in peace, but she had also learned not to fear its arrival. They walked together to the solar, where a fresh pot of tea steamed beside a plate of dark honey cakes. For a moment they sat in companionable silence, sharing glances, the world turning quietly beyond the glass. The council that day was smaller than in the years just after the wars. Many of the younger lords and ladies now held their own local gatherings, content to send word to Winterfell only if trouble threatened. Trade was steady, more grain and fish than ever before, more timber going south, more wine and salt and spices coming north. Disputes were minor, quickly settled by Eddard or Lyanna, or more often by their own peers before word reached the keep. Yaris Ward, now a captain of his own ship, sent word of pirates well beyond the shivering sea, but none daring to threaten the new peace. From the Riverlands, Edmure's grandson brought a cask of cherry brandy, promising it was the last he would send until the next wedding, his own, to a girl whose mother had once served Sansa's table. The wildling villages beyond the wall, now prosperous in their small way, sent gifts of woven cloaks and antler charms, and a delegation of their young men came south to join the Night's Watch, no longer as punishment, but as calling and craft. When the council adjourned, Tyrion wandered the bailey, stopping to speak with the maester's new apprentices about White Harbor's latest treatise on crop rotation. The sun climbed high, and the market square filled with voices. Traders from the Vale, riders from Dorne, Braavosi with bright silk scarves. Tyrion, always curious, asked questions, listened, and returned with news. The Reach was planning another harvest fair. Old Town's healers had found new ways to treat cough in children, and a party of Sarnori merchants had arrived from beyond the narrow sea, eager to sell their fine horses. He found Eddard in the Godswood, reading aloud to a half-circle of small-folk children, Lyanna beside him, whittling as she listened. Tyrion stood beneath the swaying leaves and listened to his son's voice, a story of a clever prince and a wolf who could speak, a fable half-remembered from Tyrion's own childhood, now adapted for northern tastes. Eddard closed the book and glanced up, a grin on his lips. "Was I as good a reader as you?" "Far better," Tyrion replied. "And braver, too. It's no small thing to teach the next generation." Lyanna snorted. "It's no small thing to keep their attention either." The day passed in gentle busyness. Tyrion penned a reply to the Princess of Dorne. Her latest letter full of plans for an autumn visit, ideas for new trade, questions about northern custom. Sansa met with her stewards, overseeing the repairs to the granary and the renewal of the city walls. Arya disappeared again, this time only as far as the armory, where she trained with the new captain of the guard, a woman from the Mountains of the Moon, hard-eyed and loyal as the stone she came from. Evening brought the harvest festival. The courtyard was strung with lanterns and banners, long tables groaning under the weight of pies and stews and roasted game. Music drifted through the dusk, pipes, drums, and the sweet high voices of the youngest children. The people of Winterfell gathered in their hundreds, from highborn to humble, all sitting together beneath the same stars. Tyrion and Sansa presided at the central table, their children and Arya beside them, laughter easy and unforced. After the first course, Tyrion stood, raising his cup. Once, not so long ago, a night like this would have seemed impossible. A dream for fools or children. But tonight, look how far we've come. We have faced hunger and darkness, fear and war. Yet here we are. Friends, kin, neighbors, partners in peace. I thank each of you for your work, your faith, Your courage. May the gods keep. The cheer was thunderous, rolling out through the gates and across the fields, answered by a dozen barking dogs, and distantly, by the howl of a wolf beneath the waxing moon. Dancing followed, Sansa's gown swirling as she spun with Eddard, Lyanna laughing with her wildling friends, Arya clapping along, her smile wide and fierce. Tyrion found himself roped into a reel by a pair of young maids, one wildling, one maester's apprentice, and danced until his knees ached and his lungs burned. Much later, when the stars wheeled high and the fire pits burned low, Tyrion and Sansa slipped away to the ramparts. The night air was cool, scented with apples and smoke. Sansa leaned on the parapet, gazing out at the lights of the city, her eyes distant. "You have given them peace," she said, almost to herself. He shook his head, smiling. "No, my love. We have given them the chance to make it, and they have seized it for themselves." She turned to him, brushing a silver lock from his brow. "Do you ever regret staying?" "Never. Not for a single breath. I found my heart in the north." Her smile softened, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They watched the world together, a world that was never perfect, always changing, yet better than either of them had ever dared imagine. Below, the last of the festival laughter drifted upward, a living promise to the gods, to their children, to the future. And in that moment, Tyrion Lannister, once the lost and scorned lion, felt utterly at home in the heart of the wolves. Peace would not last forever, but while it lasted, it would be enough. Noindi. As summer matured toward its end, a soft haze spread over the north, blurring the green of the fields and turning every afternoon gold. The world seemed to slow its pace. In the mornings, the air was cool and sweet, scented with new hay and wildflowers, and Winterfell's stones were warm by midday. It was a time of ripeness, a time when the realm's efforts bore fruit, apples and wheat, peace and understanding, children running through the bailey with hands sticky from stolen honey. Tyrion often watched from the terrace above the main yard, a cup of mellow cider in his hand, his legs resting on a low stone bench. From here he could observe the entire cycle of the day. Farmers hauling crates of apples from the distant orchards, wildlings in felt cloaks mending a gate, Arya perched on the wall, teaching a pack of orphans how to spot a liar by the way they blink. Sansa sometimes joined him, folding herself beside him on the bench, her skirt pooled around her knees, her presence as calming as the summer wind. It was late in the season when Eddard returned from Dorne. His hair had darkened and his skin had browned in the southern sun, but the laughter that had always marked his boyhood rang as brightly as ever. He came with a company of riders, Dornish and Northern both, bearing gifts and tidings, and a new silk banner, crimson and gold, stitched with the entwined sun and direwolf that had become the symbol of their peace. His arrival was marked by celebration. At the feast that evening, Eddard presented Sansa with a small chest of lemons, and Arya with a dagger wrought in the Braavosi style. For Tyrion, he brought a scroll, a treatise on the laws of water rights in the Summer Isles, signed in the curling script of a distant prince. "You always said the world is larger than any wall," Eddard told him. "I've brought you a piece of it." Lyanna, who had grown to nearly Arya's height and inherited her aunt's restlessness, raced Eddard through the halls and across the yards, their laughter tangling together until it was impossible to tell one from the other. Sansa watched them with quiet joy, pride and longing mixed in her eyes. They are both parts of the world we never saw. She told Tyrion as they stood by the heart tree after the feast. Parts we made together. A new season, though, always brought new questions. The peace was strong, yet not unchallenged. The wildlings' villages flourished, but there were whispers of trouble on the edges. Old feuds flaring up in the Barrowlands, a merchant from the east claiming unfair weights in the market, a sour rumor that a certain knight in the south was gathering support from old malcontents. None of these troubled Sansa overmuch, but she met them all with clear eyes, steady hand, and the confidence of one who had survived far worse. Tyrion handled the merchant dispute himself, inviting the involved parties to the small council chamber. There, in the presence of Glover, Manderly, and Arya, He questioned each with the patience of a man who had once survived the politics of King's Landing. The truth came out in time. The merchant's scales had been tampered with by a clever child, in exchange for a handful of candied chestnuts. The matter ended not in exile or blood, but in laughter, and the boy was set to learning arithmetic under the watchful eye of the maester. As the moon waxed and the nights grew longer, the first hints of autumn arrived. A coolness on the wind, a red flush in the apples, the sounds of distant geese returning from the far north. One evening, as the harvest moon rose full and bright, Sansa gathered the household for a council. Arya leaned against the fire with a cup of sweet wine. Eddard sat at his mother's right, Lyanna and the wildling elders beside him. Tyrion took his place at Sansa's left, fingers steepled, eyes thoughtful. "We've had 3 years of plenty," Sansa began, her voice strong. "But the world never forgets to test us. The wildlings speak of a sickness in the far woods. Our own granaries are full, but some of our neighbors to the east have lost crops to blight. I would see the north share its plenty, so none go hungry or sick." There were grumbles. Old habits of hoarding and suspicion still lingered. But Eddard and Lyanna both spoke up for the plan, as did the wildling elders. Arya promised to ride out herself to oversee the sharing of grain and honey and apples. "The people trust me," she said with a crooked grin. "And if they don't, they trust my sword." Tyrion, listening, realized that the heart of the council had shifted. Now it beat in the voices of the next generation, in Eddard's diplomacy and Lyanna's fire, in Arya's unwavering loyalty. He looked to Sansa and saw only pride, no trace of worry. She had shaped them well, given them the gift of a future not defined by war. The weeks that followed were full of small journeys. Caravans left Winterfell for the east, escorted by wildlings and knights, bearing not only food but books and medicine, wool and news. Arya traveled ahead, returning with stories of the grateful and the suspicious alike, of old wounds slowly healing and new friendships begun. Eddard took charge of the keep, conferring daily with the stewards, learning the deeper patterns of Winterfell's life, how water was drawn from the wells, how the guards rotated, which doors creaked on cold nights. Lyanna rode north with a band of hunters, keeping the wild places safe, coming home with deer and with wild stories that the children begged to hear each evening by the fire. The university in White Harbor flourished, its library now larger than even the Citadel's oldest wings. Maesters and healers came from across the sea, adding their voices to the chorus of learning. Sansa visited in early autumn, bringing Eddard and Lyanna. She sat in on lectures, spoke with scholars, listened to the plans for a new hospital and a school for wildling children. Tyrion wrote a series of essays, now read as far away as Pentos and Lies. His name, once cursed and whispered in contempt, now invoked in every hall as a builder, a reconciler, a father of peace. On the last night of their stay, the people of White Harbor lit lanterns and sent them adrift on the Blackwater, each carrying a wish or a prayer. Tyrion, watching the flickering lights disappear into the darkness, felt the old ache of uncertainty, yet also a hope so sharp it made him blink. "Do you think," he asked Sansa quietly, "it will last, this hope?" She took his hand. "No peace lasts forever, but it lasts as long as those who love it defend it, and we have taught them how." They returned to Winterfell as the leaves began to turn. Eddard met them at the gates, already full of news. A new shipment from Braavos, a message from Dorne, a brawl among the stable boys over who could lift Lyanna's bow. The keep buzzed with life, children and dogs and merchants and lords weaving together in a tapestry that Tyrion knew was fragile, but more beautiful for its fragility. The first frost came with a night of crystal stars. Sansa and Tyrion walked the ramparts, their arms twined. Below them, lights flickered in every window, and the sounds of a lute drifted up from the kitchens. "Tell me a story," Sansa murmured. So Tyrion did. He spoke of lions and wolves, of a world broken and remade, of courage, and of hope, passed down from hand to hand. Heart to heart, he spoke of children who laughed in the halls, of harvest feasts and snowy mornings, a forgiveness hard-won and peace more precious than gold. And when the story ended and the night grew quiet, Sansa pressed her lips to his brow and whispered, "Thank you, my lion, for bringing me home." Winter might come again. There would be hardship, as there always was. But the heart of the North beat strong, woven from the laughter and labor and love of those who had chosen peace and learned, at last, to defend it. And in that enduring warmth, Tyrion Lannister, once outcast, now beloved, rested content, knowing he had left the world richer, and the North forever changed. A slow dawn crept over the towers of Winterfell, pale and pearly, hinting at a cold snap to come. Smoke curled from every chimney as servants bustled to build up the hearths. Even in peacetime the castle was a living thing, its ancient stones and sprawling corridors humming with purpose. Tyrion woke before the sun, as he often did in these latter years, slipping from the warmth of the bed he shared with Sansa, to pad barefoot across the woven rugs and splash water on his face. The air was brisk, tinged with the scent of apples and sweet wood smoke, and he found himself smiling at the familiar ache in his joints, a reminder of time's passage and how many seasons of plenty he had been granted in the North. He dressed quietly, wrapped himself in a thick gray robe, and tiptoed through the corridor to the small study he had claimed years before. Here, maps crowded the walls, ledgers filled the shelves, and scrolls from distant lands awaited his attention. On the desk, a half-finished letter to the Citadel in Old Town waited beside a cup of mulled cider gone cold. Tyrion set the cup aside, stretched his cramped fingers, and for a little while, lost himself in the silent order of numbers and plans. The castle's peace was profound but never careless. Eddard had left at first light for the southern border, leading a retinue of wildlings and Northmen to mediate a land dispute with a stubborn barrow lord whose fields overlapped a free-folk grazing path. Lyanna had gone west 2 days before, her party trailing laughter and the scent of pine, bent on tracking the movements of a rogue band of mountain clansmen. Arya, as ever, had disappeared without warning, though her last message had been a strip of parchment tied to the leg of a blue-eyed hawk. Still watching, still free, back when the moon turns. The work of rule went on. Tyrion attended council in Sansa's solar, the windows fogged with cold and breath, as the lords and stewards reported in turn. A new roof finished on the granary, a merchant's caravan from Pennos stalled on the southern road, an outbreak of fever in a small village that had been swiftly contained. Sansa listened to each with her calm, unwavering attention, her fingers folded on the table, her presence a still point in the swirl of voices. "We'll send aid and medicine," she decreed, voice gentle but firm. "Let the Pentoshi merchants wait in comfort, not suspicion. And as for the granary, Glover, your men have done well." When council adjourned, Sansa and Tyrion lingered by the fire, sharing bread and cheese and a pot of tea, the easy hush between them needing no words. He traced her fingers with his own, memorizing again the feel of her hand in his. She smiled, a touch of the old shyness lingering in her eyes. "I used to dread the quiet moments," she admitted. "I thought they meant something was coming. But now, I cherish them." "Only the wise learn that," Tyrion replied. "And the lucky." Later, they strolled the Bailey together, pausing to watch the children of the keep. Wildlings and Northmen, lordlings and orphans, practice with wooden swords or play at dragons and deerwolves. Arya's youngest apprentices ran races along the curtain wall, their shouts ringing across the stones. In the smithy, the clang of hammers mingled with laughter as a team of wildling women forged new plowshares, their sleeves rolled up, faces streaked with soot. News from the realm continued to arrive. A letter from the Princess of Dorne proposing an exchange of healers for the coming winter. A shipment of amber and worked glass from the Summer Isles, bartered for bear pelts and smoked salmon. An offer from the Citadel to send a scholar north to teach new methods of crop rotation, the first such invitation ever extended beyond the neck. Tyrion handled each matter with a steady hand, sometimes with humor, sometimes with the gravity that still commanded respect. He found joy in solving small problems, in making sure the realm's workings turned smoothly, in hearing laughter instead of tears when a dispute was settled. One afternoon, as a cold wind gusted in from the east, he stood on the battlements with Sansa, watching the distant line of riders return across the open plain, Eddard and his company, weary but whole. The sun gleamed on the wolf's head pennant, and Tyrion felt a rush of relief and pride. They met the party in the yard. Eddard, tall and strong as a young oak, embraced his mother and gripped Tyrion's arm with a smile. The Barrow Lord bent in the end. "I told him what you would have, father, that a stubborn peace is better than a bitter feud." He agreed to let the wildlings graze, so long as they share water at the well. "Well done," Sansa said, pride shining in her eyes. Lyanna returned a day later, muddy and triumphant, a pair of sheep trailing after her and 3 mountain children in tow. They were hungry and lost. She explained as she introduced the children to the maester and the cooks. "I promised them a bed and a lesson in archery if they'd behave." "Recruiting already?" Arya teased, emerging from the shadows near the kitchen, her grin sharp as ever. Lyanna just shrugged. "You taught me well." Autumn deepened, the harvest in full swing. Winterfell swelled with life. Wagons unloading grain, masons repairing the outer wall, travelers and traders crowding the market square. The university in White Harbor sent its latest graduates to take up posts in every corner of the north, their learning and energy sparking new projects. A windmill in the Barrowlands, a new road through the Wolfswood, a school for healers in the wildling villages. Tyrion corresponded with them all, his advice sought as far as King's Landing and the Summer Isles, his name spoken with respect, affection, sometimes awe. The harvest festival arrived, brighter and more joyous than any in memory. The great hall glowed with lanterns. Tables groaned with venison, fish, sweetmeats, and bread. Sansa presided, Eddard and Lyanna airsides, Arya leading a dance that swept half the hall off their feet. Tyrion found himself surrounded by children. Northmen, wildlings, even a sullen Braavosi merchant's son coaxed into laughter with a clever story. Later, as the music faded, he slipped away to the Godswood, Sansa at his side. They walked among the ancient trees, the heart tree's red leaves whispering overhead. Tyrion listened to the hush and felt the pulse of peace, so hard-won, so fiercely cherished. Sansa stopped beside the white trunk and pressed her hand to its bark, her eyes closed. "When I was a girl, I thought happiness meant escaping this place," she said softly. "Now I know it means returning to it, remaking it until it fits the hope we dreamed." Tyrion nodded, taking her hand. "It was never the stones that made it home. It was the people, and the choices we made together." Bendo. They stood for a long time, until the moon rose and the stars wheeled high. When they returned to the hall, Arya and Lyanna were still dancing, and Eddard sat by the hearth with the children, telling stories of southern deserts and northern snows, of wolves and lions, of a peace stronger than steel. As the year waned, frost crept over the fields, and Winterfell's fires burned higher. In the quiet, Tyrion found contentment, not in the absence of struggle, but in the knowledge that the struggle had been shared, and that the peace they had made was written into the very life of the realm. Old fears returned sometimes, in dreams or rumors, but never for long. The North was changed. Its people had learned the strength of patience, the value of laughter, the wisdom of knowing when to fight and when to forgive. In those last bright days of autumn, as the apples ripened and the leaves fell in a golden storm, Tyrion sat with Sansa beneath the heart tree and watched their world turn toward another winter. They were older now, their children grown and strong, the realm in safe hands. "If this is all I leave behind," he murmured, "it is enough." Sansa pressed his hand, her eyes shining. "It is more than enough, my love. It is everything." And as the first snow fell, silent and soft, Winterfell stood, stone and story, laughter and memory, enduring, thriving, at peace. A gentle frost had glazed the world by morning, painting every branch and window pane in Winterfell with delicate filigree. The nights had grown longer, the air sharper. The sky streaked each dawn with the bright, clean blue of early winter. In the weeks since harvest, the rhythm of the keep had shifted. Markets and laughter gave way to quieter, steadier labors. Stalls were broken down, grain bins sealed, livestock drawn into warmer pens. Every chamber was swept and scrubbed, every fire kept stoked against the darkness that crept earlier each day. Tyrion woke early, as he always did now, finding Sansa already gone from their bed. He smiled at the cool spot where she'd lain, knowing she was out among her people. Moving quietly through the corridors and kitchens, asking after the welfare of cooks and stable hands, wildling mothers and merchant sons. He dressed slowly, his joints stiff with the season, and wrapped himself in the heavy gray cloak Sansa had commissioned last year. A cloak fit for a northern lord, lion and direwolf, embroidered side by side over his heart. The corridors were thick with the smell of cinnamon and roasting squash, and he paused often, exchanging greetings with maids and pages. His presence by now as natural as the snows themselves. When he entered the main hall, he found Eddard already there, conferring with the steward over the winter stores. Lyanna perched atop a high stool at the hearth, boots steaming as she recounted her latest hunt to a rapt cluster of children. Arya, when she appeared, drifted in from the cold, cheeks red, her hood rimed with frost, trailing snow from her boots. Sansa returned soon after, her cheeks pink from the dawn air, hair neatly braided, her expression calm but keen. "We have a guest," she announced, voice carrying just enough to draw the family's attention. A rider came in at first light, a maester from Old Town. "He brings news and a request for our council." Tyrion's eyebrows climbed. A request? Not a summons. How things do change. Sansa gave him a small smile. "We've earned their respect, my lord. Let's see what else they'll ask of us." The maester, a young woman in crisp gray, was ushered in before breakfast. She bore the mark of a healer and a scholar, rings of copper and silver, a bright eye, a careful step. "The Citadel sends you greetings and thanks, Lady Sansa, Lord Tyrion." She said, bowing low. "Word of your northern schools and the hospital at White Harbor has spread far. We would see them flourish. We also ask humbly for your wisdom in a matter of succession and law." Over bread and fruit and cheese, the maester described the unrest that flickered through the south. The last years had seen many lords die peacefully in their beds, leaving widows and daughters, new heirs raised in the North's tradition. But old custom warred with new hope. Some houses clung to the past, refusing to allow women or bastards their place in the line. Others demanded reforms, invoking Winterfell as their example. Tyrion listened, chewing thoughtfully. Eddard and Lyanna watched their parents, knowing the pattern of such conversations, the slow, measured circling of history and precedent, the weighing of risk and need. After breakfast, the council convened. Sansa called in the senior stewards, wildling elders, Arya and Eddard, and Lyanna Detad. The discussion was spirited, practical, never bitter. Sansa spoke first, drawing on her own memories. Her mother's lessons, her father's failures and strengths, the example of Margaery Tyrell, and the hard lessons of King's Landing. Tyrion added stories from the courts of Lannisport, of the way custom could be bent, quietly, for the good of a house. Arya's voice was clear and sharp. "Give them the chance to prove themselves, and most will rise higher than you'd ever expect. Tradition should bend, not break, but it should never be an excuse for injustice." In the end, the council reached consensus. Sansa dictated a letter to be sent to the Citadel, to be copied and distributed by maesters and septons across the realm. A treatise not just on inheritance, but on the duty of a lord or lady to their people. No law, it concluded, can endure if it makes enemies of the next generation. The health of the land, the loyalty of the heart, these are what make a house endure and a realm prosper. The maester returned south with thanks and a trunk full of northern books and medicines. As snow fell in thick veils, Tyrion saw the letter off, standing with Sansa on the steps as the maester's horse plodded away through the white. "A wise law is a living thing," Tyrion said, "and lives only so long as people choose to honor it." Sansa slipped her arm through his. "Then we will teach them to honor it, every year, in every hall." Winter came on apace. The castle gathered in on itself. Stories told by firelight, songs old and new, food shared in abundance and laughter. The people of Winterfell had learned to endure not only by stockpiling grain, but by binding themselves to one another. Every lord, every wildling elder, every child knew they would be cared for, that their place at the table was as secure as their loyalty and kindness. One week, a small wildling girl fell ill with a fever. The maester was summoned, and Tyrion himself spent long nights by the girl's side, telling stories and offering comfort as she shivered and sweated beneath heavy furs. Lyanna brought willow bark and honey, Arya watched the door, and Sansa sat by the mother, her presence a balm. When the fever broke, relief washed through the keep like sunlight, and for a day the only business was to thank the gods and feed the child whatever her heart desired. The long dark pressed close, but Winterfell glowed with life. Tyrion spent evenings in the library, penning histories, teaching children, wildlings and highborn alike, the art of reading, of asking questions, of challenging stories until the truth shone through. Sansa led the household in singing, her voice strong and clear as she taught the youngest the old songs of the North. Eddard kept the larders full. Lyanna kept the walls safe. Arya brought news from far and near. And Tyrion, the lion among wolves, learned to love the silence that comes only when the world is truly at peace. One stormy night, Tyrion sat in the Godswood with Sansa, the heart tree looming above, snow falling in slow spirals. "Do you miss it?" Sansa asked. "The world beyond these walls?" He considered, his breath a cloud in the cold. "Some nights I dream of sun on the Blackwater, or the roar of crowds in King's Landing. But those dreams always end with longing for this place. For you. For what we built." She smiled, brushing snow from his sleeve. "You have given them more than peace, Tyrion. You have given them a future." He shook his head gently. "We did it together. It was never one hand alone." They walked back to the castle, Sansa's hand in his, the windows ablaze with lamplight. Within those walls, 100 voices called out. Laughter, song, the music of knives on plates, and the steady rhythm of hope renewed. Winter had come, and with it, the knowledge that what they had made would endure. Not a realm of warriors, but of stewards. Not a land clinging to the old wounds, but a place where tradition was a thread, not a chain. In the hush and hush of falling snow, Tyrion found contentment deeper than gold, warmer than any hearth, bright as the dawn that would always inevitably follow even the longest night. A bitter wind cut across the north as winter settled in for its long, slow reign, but inside Winterfell, the great stone walls held warmth enough for all. Tyrion's days were ordered and full, a tapestry of simple rituals that gave the season shape and sweetness. He began each morning at the east window, where the pale sun struggled through clouds, drinking spiced tea and reading over the daily reports. Most were ordinary things. New calves in the stables, repairs to the eastern roof, a cache of apples found unspoiled in the old cellars. But occasionally a letter from White Harbor or Old Town reminded him how much the world had changed. Eddard and Lyanna divided the work of the keep as easily as they once had their childhood games. Lyanna was always with the riders, her hair streaming from beneath her hood, cheeks reddened by the wind, eyes sharp for any sign of threat or hardship in the villages. Eddard lingered among the small folk, his voice gentle but firm, settling disputes with the careful fairness he'd learned from both his parents. When he entered the great hall at midday, even the wildlings and the most grizzled northern lords nodded in respect. Arya slipped in and out of Winterfell like a shadow, appearing for council or supper, then vanishing again, always returning with news of storms or births or the first signs of thaw at the White Knife. The keep itself bustled in winter. The kitchens glowed, the air thick with cinnamon, and rendered fat, smoke curling from the hearths. Laughter echoed from the quarters of the wildling children, now indistinguishable in accent and manner from their northern playmates. The stables, thick with hay and horses, rang with the voices of stable boys and girls from both sides of the wall, each eager to boast of their favorite mount or the finest ride through the snowy woods. Sansa held Winterfell's heart together. She spent her days in the solar, the great hall, and the sick rooms, her presence both balm and command. She stitched banners and reviewed the ledgers, planned the midwinter feast, comforted the lonely and visited the dying. Her hair, streaked with silver now, was almost always braided and pinned with the same silver direwolf Tyrion had gifted her many winters past. She rarely wore a crown, but every soul in the keep, from lord to laundress, treated her word as law and her kindness as their shield against the dark. Tyrion's work was less visible, but no less vital. He wrote letters to Old Town and White Harbor, advised stewards on how to stretch the stores, and met often with the young maester, who sought his insight on every new law or policy. He spent long hours in the library, where children gathered on thick carpets to hear him tell stories of the realm. Some true, some invented, all full of wit and lessons. He wrote out new histories, careful to include the voices of the wildlings, women, and small folk, so that the North story would not be told as it had been, but as it was. On one bitter morning, a rider arrived from the western coast, an iron-born woman who had trained with Yara and now wore a patchwork of wolf and kraken on her cloak. She brought word of a shipwreck, 3 survivors, and a request. Let us build a beacon on the cliffs. The storms are less deadly than they once were, but the sea is never safe. If the North will send men and stone, we will send our best shipwrights, and the next spring, you will have a lighthouse that will be sung of, from Bear Island to Old Town. Tyrion welcomed her into the council, and Sansa quickly agreed to the pact. Lyanna organized the teams, Arya vanished for a week and returned with fresh maps, and Eddard wrote to the princes of Dorne and the Reach, inviting them to send builders and architects, so that every ship who sails our waters knows the land welcomes them, and the North stands watch. The promise of peace was always in the doing, never in the saying. And Tyrion felt a sharp pride at how the new world was shaped by many hands. As winter deepened, storms battered the land. The gates were drifted shut more than once, and the castle's warmth became a treasure against the roaring wind. At night, Tyrion and Sansa dined by the fire with their family, sharing tales and memories. Lyanna's stories of the hunt grew wilder with each retelling. Arya brought back a carved horn from the Skagosi, and Eddard surprised everyone with a song he'd learned in Dorne, sweet and strange, which had the children dancing late into the night. Tyrion and Sansa often ended the evening in the Godswood, walking arm in arm beneath the great boughs, breath rising in plumes. The heart tree was white and ancient, its face smoothed by time, the red leaves bright against the snow. Sansa's fingers were always cold in his, but her smile was the old secret one he remembered from their earliest days together. One night, as the northern lights danced across the sky and wolves howled far off in the woods, Sansa paused beneath the heart tree. "Do you ever wonder what will be written of us, Tyrion, after we are gone?" He looked up, the green light glimmering in her hair. "I hope they say we learned from our pain, that we gave the North something more than walls and stories, that we built something that endured." "Ben?" She squeezed his hand. "I think we have. Look at them. Eddard, Lyanna, Arya, all the children. They know how to forgive. They know how to work together. That is our legacy." The feast of midwinter approached, a night of song and story, of bread broken and secrets shared. The keep filled with guests, wildlings, mountain folk, traders from the south, and even a few quiet men from the Night's Watch, come down to bring tidings and trade. The great hall glittered with banners and light. Sansa sat at the high table, Tyrion at her side, the hall full of music and laughter. Eddard made a toast to the health of the realm. Lyanna challenged a wildling champion to an archery contest, and let him win, to the wild applause of the crowd. And Arya told a tale of the first wolf who ever stalked the north, a fable that ended with hope and a promise of spring. Tyrion spoke last. rising to a hush that fell across the hall. "Once," he began, "I believed I was too small to change the world. I thought peace was a word spoken by the dead or the foolish. But here now, I see what can be done. By patience, by courage, by listening to those who were once our enemies, and by refusing to let the old hatreds rule our hearts. The North is strong, not because of its walls, but because of its people, because you choose, each day, to be better than what came before. That is my wish for all the world. May it be remade, as we have remade this home." "Now." He sat, and the hall erupted in cheers. Arya pounding the table, Eddard beaming, Lyanna tossing a crust of bread in the air for the wildling hounds to catch. After the feast, Tyrion and Sansa walked once more beneath the stars. She leaned into him, her hair threaded with frost, her eyes bright and full of memory. "Peace is never finished," she said softly, "but it is beautiful while it lasts." He pressed a kiss to her brow. "And it will last, as long as there are hands to build it, and hearts to defend it." The world was still, the snow deep and silent. But in Winterfell, hope and warmth held the darkness at bay. The stories of the North now were stories of laughter, of kindness, of a peace carried forward by those who had learned, through long winters and brief golden summers, to cherish what mattered most. And as the firelight flickered from the windows, and the old heart tree watched over all, Tyrion Lannister felt, more truly than ever before, that he had come home. "Oh, Pa, Kay." Spring crept over the North with a patience that spoke of ancient wisdom. It did not burst upon Winterfell as in the songs of the South, but rather seeped in slow and steady, a touch of green at the river's edge, a loosened hush in the snow's grip, the song of water trickling under the ice. In the bailey, the first crocuses pierced the earth, and children abandoned their boots to run laughing through thawing mud. The castle itself sighed with the change. Hearth fires banked lower, windows thrown open to the freshening air, every step ringing with new energy. Tyrion felt the change in his bones. He walked the ramparts most mornings, breathing deeply, his old pains eased by the softer wind. Sansa sometimes joined him, wrapped in a pale cloak, her silver-streaked hair caught up with a pin of apple wood and jade. She watched the sun rise over the fields, her face gentle and unguarded. On these walks, they rarely spoke of rule or worry. They spoke instead of the world as it was becoming, of gardens they would plant and children's voices echoing in the godswood, of the long memory of the North. In these bright days, Winterfell was alive as he had never seen it, even in the heyday of lords long dead. The yard rang with music and laughter, old banners shaken out and hung with pride beside new ones. The direwolf and lion twined with the kraken, the son of Dorne, the open hand of Braavos, even the crescent moon of the Vale. Lyanna and Arya organized games of strength and wit for the children, teaching them to read the wind, to mend their own boots, to trust a friend and doubt a story, to laugh and question and run wild. Eddard, grown tall and wise, rode north and south in these months. Sometimes he returned from White Harbor, overseeing repairs to the docks, or giving a speech at the university, now world-renowned for its libraries and schools. Sometimes he returned from the wildling villages, where he listened to grievances and delivered news from the southern lords, his approach greeted with trust rather than wariness. The people, Northmen and wildlings, children of lords and crofters, and the free folk beyond the wall, spoke of him as the future, and Tyrion felt a quiet pride for the man his son had become. It was during one of these days, bright with promise, that a letter arrived by swift horse from Dorne. The princess herself wrote in her elegant hand, inviting Eddard and Lyanna to Sunspear for the wedding of her brother. The missive was full of plans for a festival. Tournaments, feasts, a sharing of music and knowledge, a union of houses not by blood or conquest, but by choice and respect. Tyrion and Sansa watched their children pack for the journey. Lyanna's eyes sparkled with excitement. She packed light, carrying only her bow, her best boots, and a battered old storybook Arya had given her. Eddard packed carefully, including a leather-bound journal and a set of treatises from White Harbor to present as gifts. Arya, who would go with them, sharpened her swords and sent a raven ahead to warn the Dornish they would be swift and hungry and full of questions. Before they left, Sansa and Tyrion called the family together in the Godswood, the sun sifting down through the red leaves, the air rich with the scent of wet earth and possibility. "Go as Starks and Lannisters," Sansa said, her voice strong and proud, "but return as friends to all the realm. Learn and teach, and remember that every house, every heart, has its place in the world we have made." They rode out at dawn, a party of 20, Northmen, wildlings, maester and bard, and a handful of excited squires, their laughter trailing behind like a banner. Sansa and Tyrion watched them disappear over the bridge, silent for a time, arms around one another. "Will you miss them?" Sansa asked quietly. "Every day," Tyrion answered, "but I rejoice in every day that lets them see the world unafraid." The castle was quieter for their absence, but not somber. Sansa and Tyrion found themselves with unexpected time to walk the gardens, to taste the first honeyed wine of spring, to watch the bees return to their hives and the sparrows begin to nest in the old apple tree. Sansa took up painting again, her canvases a riot of color. Tyrion wrote letters and finished a history of the wildlings, sending the manuscript to White Harbor with a note for the university's new head librarian. "Tell them all stories are true, if you listen long enough." News from Dorne arrived by raven and rider. The wedding was a marvel, the tourney fierce, the north well represented by Lyanna's archery and Eddard's measured words. The southern lords, once wary, had found kinship in their new cousins. Arya's tales of the road soon reached Winterfell, relayed by a laughing wildling girl sent ahead with a song and a message. All is well. They have met a man who claims to know the secret of the sand snakes. Lyanna is determined to best him at the bow. Eddard has fallen in love with the taste of lemons and the art of debate. I am teaching them to dance. The weeks passed in a kind of golden haze. At night, Sansa and Tyrion walked the empty corridors, remembering their own travels, the winter survived, the dreams they'd once dared not speak. Sometimes in the deep quiet, Sansa would sing an old song, her voice low and clear, and Tyrion would sit by the window, listening as the North's heart beat strong around him. When Eddard and Lyanna returned, bronzed and full of stories, arms full of gifts and heads full of new friendships, Winterfell erupted with celebration. The children of the keep crowded the yard, clamoring for tales of Dorne and the festival. Lyanna distributed wooden sun medallions and tiny glass animals. Eddard gifted the maester a scroll on southern medicines, and told the cooks tales of a sweet bread he'd tasted on the road. At the feast, Arya recited a tale of their journey, embellishing every step, turning trouble into laughter, and laughter into hope. Sansa watched her family and the gathered household with quiet contentment, knowing that what she and Tyrion had planted was blooming in every heart around her. That night, when the torches had burned low, and the children were at last asleep, Tyrion and Sansa stood on the ramparts beneath a sky, trembling with stars. "This is what I always wished for," Sansa whispered. "A home and a world where peace grows stronger than old wounds." Tyrion nodded, resting his head against hers. "We have made a new story here, you and I, one that will be told long after we are gone." She smiled, her breath warm against his cheek. "Then let us keep telling it. Together." In the distance, a wolf howled, answered by another and another, their music twining into the silence as surely as spring twined with hope. The North, reborn and at peace, rested beneath the watchful stars, a realm of laughter and learning, courage and kindness, a home for those who once had none. And as the night unfolded, Tyrion Lannister, once alone and adrift, knew that he had given more than himself to the world. With Sansa, he had made something immortal, a legacy not of conquest, but of healing and of love that endured beyond every shadow of winter. The rains of spring fell long and steady that year, drumming on slate roofs and running in shining ribbons down the walls of Winterfell. The air in the keep was cool and fragrant, every breath spiced with the scent of wet earth, crushed grass, and the faint sweetness of plum blossoms, from the little orchard Sansa had planted outside the Godswood years ago. Tyrion loved these days. The world grew lush and green, and the sound of rain on the glass was a gentle music that soothed his restless mind. In the quiet mornings, he woke with Sansa at his side, her hair loose and silvered on the pillow, her hand warm in his. The windows were often fogged with the rain, and he would press his palm to the glass, smiling at the smears left behind. Proof that he belonged, that this stone castle and its many lives had become his true home. Breakfasts were merry even on the rainiest mornings. Lyanna, grown fierce and beautiful, recited plans for the season's first hunt while buttering bread with a knife as sharp as any sword. Arya, her dark hair streaked with silver now, was home for a fortnight, sharing news of the wildling camps beyond the wall. How they had finally elected a woman as their leader. How 2 of the oldest chiefs had declared peace and married with half the North's blessing. Eddard, freshly returned from a month in White Harbor, reported on the university's latest project, a book of northern plants and their healing uses, written in both the Old Tongue and the Common. The Maester sent word that it would soon be copied and sent as far as Old Town and the Free Cities. The Summer Islanders want to trade for it, Eddard said, blue eyes alight. If we'll send a few of our healers in exchange. Sansa listened with quiet pride, her gaze drifting from face to face. She had become the heart of these meals, drawing everyone in, guiding the talk with gentle questions and the weight of her presence. Every day she found time to walk the halls and courtyards, to speak with the stable hands and the youngest kitchen girls, to comfort those who mourned and to laugh with those who could not help but rejoice at the world's beauty. The Council of Winterfell now spanned every corner of the realm. The wildlings sent their best speakers, fierce and plain, their speech full of the old gods and the new ways. Dorne had sent a young princess to study law at White Harbor, her retinue scattering bright silks and sharper wits through the castle's stone corridors. The Ironborn, too, had changed. Yara's ward, now Lord of Pike, sent letters written in both the Old Tongue and the Common, proposing a joint fleet to patrol the western coast and drive off any slavers foolish enough to test the peace. As the days lengthened and the rain softened, Tyrion often took long walks with Sansa, through gardens slick with dew, past towers softened by moss and memory. She showed him the first green shoots in her orchard, the budding strawberries in the old kitchen beds, the beehives she had ordered built along the warm south wall. This is the legacy I hoped for, Sansa said one day, pausing beneath the pear tree to pluck a blossom and tuck it into Tyrion's collar. Not battles or banners, but growing things, children and orchards, and stories told from one generation to the next. He kissed her hand, the simplest of vows. You've made it real, Sansa. All of it. As word spread of the spring's bounty, visitors came in greater numbers. Small folk from the Barrowlands, a party from Old Town bringing medicines and books, 2 sons of the Prince of Dorne, and a trio of Braavosi merchants. The market square outside the gates swelled with tents and laughter. Lyanna led archery contests in the yard. Arya told stories by lantern light, drawing wildlings and highborn alike into her circle. Eddard found a quiet corner most days to sit with the healers, planning for a new school at the edge of the city. But peace, like any living thing, required tending. Midway through the season, a band of sellswords arrived, hard-eyed and quick to argue. They'd heard tales of the North's wealth, its open-handedness, and believed it made the realm weak. One night, their captain stirred trouble in the market, taunting a wildling woman and threatening a blacksmith's son to die. It was Lyanna who intervened, her bow slung and her voice sharp. We are not weak, she told the captain in front of the crowd, but we have learned when to fight and when to forgive. You'll have no trouble here, unless you seek it. And if you do, you'll answer to all of us. Eddard stood at her side, quiet but unyielding. Arya, never far from the heart of any storm, watched from the shadows, ready to act if words failed. The captain, seeing the strength of the crowd and the confidence in Lyanna's stance, relented. That night, the sellswords left, their banners lowered, their pride smarting. Peace had held, not with the sword, but with the memory of all that had come before. The next morning, Sansa called a meeting in the Godswood. Sunlight splintered through the branches, dappling the family's faces. "We have built something strong," she said, "but we must remember why. Peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of trust, between houses, between peoples, between every soul who calls this place home. Let us not grow complacent. Let us listen and act and defend what we have made." Her words were met with assent. That afternoon, Sansa joined the children in planting a new row of saplings in the orchard. Tyrion sat nearby, telling stories to the youngest, a tale of a lion who traveled north and learned to love the snow, a wolf who taught him how to listen, and the family they built together at the world's edge. As the spring ripened toward summer, the world within Winterfell, and beyond its walls, felt both boundless and secure. The wildlings' new leader arrived for a week, speaking with Eddard and Lyanna about the sharing of lands and the teaching of southern ways to northern children. Arya prepared to journey again, this time to Braavos, her eyes bright at the prospect of new seas, old friends, and a city where every secret waited to be learned. Tyrion, older now, spent more evenings by the fire with Sansa, rereading old letters, reviewing new treaties, and laughing together at the world's strangeness. At night, he would wake and listen to the rain against the windows and Sansa's gentle breathing, and think that all his journeys, across mountains and seas, through the fire and ruin of old wars, had led to this quiet, hard-earned joy. On the day Arya sailed for Braavos, the whole household came to the yard to see her off. Sansa kissed her sister's cheek. Eddard embraced her. Lyanna clapped her on the shoulder, and Tyrion pressed a folded letter into her palm. "A lion's blessing wherever you go," he said softly. Arya smiled, her eyes shining with love, and promised to send a story for every port she reached. The ship vanished down the river, banners snapping. The crowd dispersed, voices low but hopeful, and Sansa slipped her hand into Tyrion's as they walked back to the hall. "We have done well," she murmured, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We have," Tyrion agreed. "And we are not done." The rains eased, and a bright day followed, a promise that peace, like spring, must be renewed again and again. Beneath Winterfell's old towers, where lion and wolf banners danced in the wind, Tyrion and Sansa watched the future unspool. Children in the orchard, the laughter of a world remade, the steady song of hope that grew with every season they were blessed to share. Oh, gay. Early summer spread her green banners across the north, coaxing life from every patch of earth and branch. By mid-morning, Winterfell's walls were dappled with sunlight and shadow. The air was alive with the buzz of bees in the blossoming orchard and the clear ring of hammers from the yard. Even the wolves seemed restless. Lyanna's youngest, a gray pup with a stubborn streak, slipped through every open gate to chase chickens and laughter both. Tyrion Lannister, hair gone to silver and hands bearing the memory of 1,000 quills, watched it all from the window of his solar. The pageantry of life, so full and vibrant, was sweeter to him for every season he had thought it might slip away. He sipped his tea, spiced with ginger, a nod to Sansa's careful kindness, and savored the soft chaos below. Lyanna racing the pup, Eddard talking with wildling elders in the sun, Arya's laughter somewhere near the forges. The day's council was smaller now. Sansa preferred it so, having learned over the years that real work was done with a few trusted minds and many listening ears. They met at a round table in the sunlit alcove, a circle that welcomed everyone, lord or wildling, healer or farmer, knight or merchant. Tyrion always kept a seat for the youngest apprentice, believing fresh eyes saw what old ones missed. As they gathered, Sansa looked to each in turn. Her beauty was subtle, grown deeper with years and grief and joy alike. The riverlands send word. The marshes near Fairmarket have flooded, but their new dams held. We'll send timber and seed grain as thanks for last year's honey harvest. She nodded to Eddard, who began writing a note in his careful hand. A wildling woman spoke next, her northern vowels softened by time at Winterfell. We've cleared more land for planting, and the children are learning your numbers and your letters, Lady Sansa. Our men ask for more scythes and a millstone, if you can spare them. Lyanna leaned forward. There's a new smith's apprentice in the yard. I'll set him to forging blades for the fields before he makes another dagger. He works faster with purpose. Arya, Home on her way to Brava spoke last. 3 new ships from the Summer Isles docked at White Harbor. They come for knowledge and trade. One captain offered me a jar of fruit wine in exchange for a story about the old Night's Watch. I told him too, and he promised to send a shipment of cinnamon. Then, the council worked through midday, then drifted apart, some to the stables, some to the kitchens, others to the orchard where the first cherries were being picked. Tyrion lingered, cleaning his spectacles, his mind busy with the old habit of finding patterns in the world's noise. Sansa remained, her gaze fixed out the window. "Do you remember?" she said softly. "When we planned for survival, not for bounty?" Tyrion nodded, smiling. "Every day. That memory is what keeps us grateful." She turned to him, her eyes warm. "What keeps you hopeful, Tyrion? Truly?" He considered, fingers tracing the carved edge of the table. "This." He gestured to the open window, to the distant laughter, to the smell of bread rising from the kitchens and the sunlight painting the banners on the yard. "I am old enough to know how rare it is to see a dream made real, and wise enough to know it only stays real if we defend it. Hope is a habit. We must choose it every day, or it slips away." She leaned over and pressed her lips to his forehead. "Then let's keep choosing." That afternoon, a party of travelers arrived. Southern traders, 2 of the new maesters, a Sarnori horse merchant with plates of silver in her hair, and a band of wildling youths who had never before crossed the great rivers. The keep was a whirl of introductions and laughter. Sansa herself greeted every guest. Eddard and Lyanna led tours through the gardens and the stables. Arya sparred with the maester's eldest, showing them that wisdom and quick feet could win as many battles as steel. Tyrion walked with the Sarnori merchant through the orchard. She marveled at the apples and cherries, the beehives, the rows of herbs. "It is not the stone walls that impress me, but the kindness in every hand." "How did you do it, Lion?" He chuckled. "Stone endures, but hearts remember. We taught each other." "Sansa and I. And our children taught the rest. There are stories here, and laws, but kindness is the mortar." She nodded gravely. "I will tell this to my daughters when I ride home." That evening, Sansa called a feast in honor of the guests. Lanterns swung in the orchard, tables overflowed with bread and fresh cheese, roast pork and early berries, wild honey and sweetmeats from the south. Tyrion sat at Sansa's right hand, toasting every banner, every new friend. He watched Lyanna dance with a Summer Islander and saw Eddard deep in conversation with a maester about planting wild rye. Arya sang an old song with the wildlings, her voice low and true, and even the Sarnori merchant was persuaded to join in. After the meal, Sansa led the guests to the Godswood, where fireflies winked among the roots. The family gathered beneath the heart tree, its leaves deep red against the dusk. Sansa spoke, her voice sure and gentle. "We welcome you not just as guests, but as kin. In this place, no one is forgotten, no story lost. May you carry the peace of Winterfell with you wherever you go." When the guests departed, Tyrion walked the orchard in the half-dark, Sansa's arm tucked in his. The trees were heavy with fruit, their branches creaking in the warm wind. "I worry sometimes," he confessed, "that all this could vanish with a single mistake. That a new war, a hard winter, could undo everything we've built." She squeezed his arm. "You once told me hope is a habit. Fear is too. But we've made a world where the next hard winter will find us together, not alone. Where war will be met by counsel, not vengeance. That is what will endure, not just the peace, but the way we defend it." He stopped and kissed her, slow and grateful beneath the moon. "You were always the bravest of us." She laughed, brushing his hair back from his brow. "We are brave together." The next morning, Lyanna rode north with the wildlings to teach archery at a new settlement. Eddard sailed for the western coast with the Sarnori merchant, eager to learn the secrets of her hardy steppe ponies. Arya lingered, promising to stay until the cherries were gone. Tyrion saw them off with a wave and a heart full of longing and pride. As summer ripened, the castle was quieter, but not lonely. Sansa spent her days in the gardens, her nights at Tyrion's side, both of them savoring the peace that had cost so much to win. Sometimes, when the evening was still, Tyrion would read aloud from old books or write new stories for the children. Tales of dragons and wolves, lions and maids, and the stubborn, gentle magic of hope. And when the stars wheeled above Winterfell, he would lie awake, listening to Sansa's breath, feeling the beat of her heart in the dark, and think that, whatever came, they had made a home where peace was as natural as summer, and love as constant as the turning of the world. Ha! The orchard hummed with bees as another warm day unfolded, sunlight spilling gold over Winterfell's old stones and new gardens alike. It was a year of abundance. The fruit trees bowed heavy with apples and pears, peas climbed up every fence, and fat trout darted in the slow green river. Children's voices rose with the larks, chasing laughter and dogs through grass that smelled of honey and the memory of rain. Tyrion walked the paths each morning, nodding to every servant and child, his hands tucked behind his back, savoring the world with a heart made wiser and gentler by time. In those days, peace seemed not just a hope, but a habit, as if the realm had at last learned to prize what was gentle and enduring. Sansa oversaw the keep's rhythms with a sure and quiet grace. She met daily with the head gardener, with healers and cooks, with the wildling matrons who had become pillars of the community. She took pride in the smallest things. A new patch of herbs thriving beneath the kitchen window, a wildling girl teaching her brothers to read, a fresh loaf of rye set aside for Tyrion's breakfast. Eddard, grown and steady, now divided his days between Winterfell and White Harbor. He'd become the realm's best peacemaker, a quiet voice who resolved disputes before they could become wounds. Letters arrived for him every week from the south and the east, from Dorne and the Vale, and even Old Town, each bearing the mark of trust hard-won and well-tended. Lyanna, always restless, traveled from the Wall to the wildest woods, teaching archery and lore, forging alliances between settlements that had once been little more than stubborn camps. She was fearless, and when she rode into the yard at dusk, the children would flock to her, clamoring for news and adventure. Arya had returned again, this time with 2 young Braavosi, eager to learn the North's ways. She and Lyanna rode out together most days, returning with stories of new trails blazed through the haunted forest, of a river where salmon leapt and a lone direwolf was glimpsed beneath the moon. It was Tyrion who kept the records. He wrote in his careful, spidery hand, numbers of cattle, stores of grain, births and deaths, new words heard in the market, ancient sayings remembered by the old women who spun beside the fire. But more than facts, he chronicled the feeling of these years, the light in Sansa's eyes, the laughter of children who had never known the sound of swords, the rare days when even the weather itself seemed to hold its breath in peace. One such morning, as the dew dried on the grass, a delegation from the Summer Isles arrived, 2 women in robes of peacock blue, bringing gifts of silks and a cask of honey wine. Sansa greeted them with Arya and Eddard at her side, the feast that night filled with new music and dancing, the courtyard alight with lanterns strung from tree to tree. Tyrion sat beside Sansa beneath the stars, watching Lyanna and one of the Summer Islanders trade arrows at a straw target. "She's grown into herself," Sansa murmured, pride and something like astonishment in her voice. "We all have," Tyrion answered. "We just had to live long enough to see it." Their guests remained a week, learning and teaching in equal measure, sharing songs and stories, tasting the tart apples and sweet berries, watching the Maester's students brew medicines and record histories. When they left, it was with promises of future journeys, and with a scroll for Tyrion, an epic from the islands, translated into the common tongue, bound in tooled leather and inscribed with a wish for enduring friendship. The seasons began to turn. The longest day brought a gathering in the Godswood, every child and adult in Winterfell assembling beneath the heart tree. Sansa led a prayer for the land's bounty, for those lost and for those returned, for peace to hold through the dark days of winter. Lyanna spoke for the wildlings, her voice clear, her words promising kinship for all who live beneath the sky. Arya read a tale she had written, a fable of wolves and lions who learned to trust, of storms weathered and dawns welcomed with laughter. Later, Tyrion walked the orchard with Eddard, the two men content in companionable silence, until Eddard said, "Do you think it will last, father? All of this?" Mememshao. Tyrion stopped beneath the old pear tree, watching a bee tumble from flower to flower. "Nothing lasts forever, Eddard. But if we're lucky, if we're wise, we build things that outlast us. Traditions, stories, friendships. The way you treat a stranger, the way you choose a stranger, the way you choose not to pick up a sword. These things echo. I think our echoes will carry farther than we know." As autumn crept near, the work of harvest began anew. Sansa walked the rows with the farmers, inspecting the fruit, listening to their concerns, offering a hand or a word or a smile. Tyrion helped draft a new treaty for the wildling settlements, giving them their own voice at council. Arya rode south again, leaving promises to return with stories for the next festival. Lyanna rode west, seeking a vanished mountain clan. Eddard journeyed to the university, then to Dorne, his presence a balm to restless hearts. The quiet evenings were Sansa and Tyrion's treasure. They walked the ramparts as dusk fell, the torches lighting the yard, the orchards shadowed and fragrant behind them. Sometimes they spoke of old pain, the friends they'd lost, the wars that had nearly ended everything. But mostly they spoke of the children, the gardens, the little triumphs of every day. One night, as the wind carried the first hint of frost, Sansa took Tyrion's hand. "I used to dream of far-off lands. Now I dream of grandchildren, of orchards and stories and peace that does not end when the snow falls." He squeezed her fingers. "I dream of you, of this place, of waking each morning knowing the world can be kind." She laughed, brushing his hair back from his brow. "If the world is kind, it is because you taught it how." As the leaves turned, visitors still came. A group of maesters from Old Town, eager to see the famed White Harbor Library. Two sons of the Dothraki come to learn the ways of horses in the snow. A delegation from the Stormlands, bearing gifts of saffron and an invitation for Sansa and Tyrion to visit the spring fair in their distant green valleys. When the first snow fell, Winterfell glowed with readiness and warmth. The granaries were full, the orchard gathered in, the wildlings' new mill sending up steady smoke, and the laughter of children never far from any room. In the quiet after supper, Tyrion sat by the fire with Sansa, writing new stories for the next festival, content in the golden hush of peace. For a time, a rare and precious time, the world was what they had always hoped it could be, strong and gentle, forgiving and wise, full of the slow and steady miracle of lives rebuilt from the ashes. Peace, Tyrion thought, was not the end of the story, but the work of living it together. And he at last was home. Ya, Kai, Edi. Kain? The first snow of the new winter arrived as if on silent wings, falling soft and slow in the darkest hour before dawn. By the time the sun rose over Winterfell, the orchard was cloaked in white, every branch limned in frost, every stone softened beneath a blanket of new-fallen silence. Inside, the castle hummed with quiet purpose. Fires were stoked, rugs beat clean and laid thick over flagstones, stores checked and counted. The smell of bread and roasting meats drifted through the halls, mingling with the sharp scent of cold carried in by every opening door. Tyrion woke to find Sansa gone from their bed, the imprint of her warmth fading but her presence lingering in the hush. He rose slowly, joints stiff but willing, and dressed in the old habit. Woolen shirt, thick breeches, the gray cloak Sansa had gifted him for his last name day. He found her in the kitchens, sleeves rolled, hair bound back, laughing as she dusted flour from a cook's cheek. The cook smiled to see Tyrion. He had spent many an hour here, swapping recipes and stories, sampling stews, or slicing apples for pies. "First snow," Sansa called, voice bright as bells. "The bakers claim it's a lucky day. Will you walk with me before the work begins?" They stepped into the yard together, the world hushed and bright. Children darted here and there, gathering snow for the first fort, their laughter ringing clear as bells. Lyanna was among them, directing the construction with all the authority she brought to council. Arya, home again, helped roll the biggest stones into place, pausing to aim a snowball at Tyrion, her throw as quick and true as ever. Eddard met them at the gate, his cheeks red from the cold, his arms full of books borrowed from the maester's chambers. "The wildling elders have sent a delegation," he said, "to talk about next year's planting. They brought smoked salmon and a new story for the children's library." "Invite them in," Sansa replied, her hand on Tyrion's arm. "We'll warm them and welcome them properly." As the day unfolded, Winterfell became a festival of welcome. Wildlings and Northmen, maesters and cooks, old friends from the villages and guests from White Harbor crowded the hall, boots and furs left at the doors. The great hearth roared, sending warmth to every corner. The wildling delegation was led by an elder woman in a wolfskin cloak, her smile fierce and proud. She greeted Sansa and Tyrion with rough affection, then swept the room with a look that dared anyone to question her right to be there. They sat in council with the elders in Sansa's household, the firelight catching in Lyanna's hair, Arya's eyes, and the new silver in Sansa's braid. Eddard presided, careful and fair, translating where needed, guiding the talk with gentle questions. The elders spoke of their hopes for the spring. New fields, more children in the school, the promise of sharing seed and harvest. Sansa promised help. Tyrion offered a tale of clever farmers from the Westerlands, and the maester pledged to ride north as soon as the weather allowed. When council ended, the tables were cleared and refilled for supper. Platters of venison and salted fish, steaming loaves, candied apples, and honeyed nuts. Musicians played, and after the meal, Arya led the children out into the snow for a moonlit game of tag. Lyanna taught the wildling girls how to build a snow direwolf. Eddard read aloud by the fire, his voice carrying the cadences of every land he'd visited, every friendship forged. Sansa and Tyrion lingered at the high table, watching it all. He pressed her hand, smiling. "You know, I once thought the heart of a great house was its walls, its treasure. But it's this, isn't it? Laughter, welcome, the courage to begin again each season." Sansa looked around at the faces, old and young, the mingled families, the easy way the wildlings and Northmen called for bread or song. "It is. And it's because we never stopped inviting the world in, even when it was hard." Then the soir. Night came early, but the keep was alive with music and stories. A wildling boy played the pipes. A kitchen girl from White Harbor sang a song of summer, and a pair of twins, one Northman, one Braavosi, performed a comic tale that had everyone laughing until they wept. After the children had gone to bed, and the last embers glowed in the hearth, Sansa and Tyrion strolled through the godswood, the snow crisp under their boots. The heart tree's red leaves shone against the white, the moon painting the bark with shadows. "Do you remember our first winter here, after the wars?" Sansa asked, voice low in the cold stillness. "Every moment," Tyrion replied. "I remember the hunger, the fear, and how you kept hope burning." She shook her head gently. "We kept it, together. That's what saved us. Not just from enemies, but from despair." Bah. They paused beneath the heart tree, its carved face watching, solemn and ancient. Sansa pressed her hand to the trunk. "I think of all the things we've built. New laws, new alliances, children who laugh and trust, and the friendships that hold the realm together. None of it would have happened if we hadn't chosen to trust, if we hadn't let the past be the past." Tyrion laid his hand over hers. "That was your greatest gift to the North and to me. You taught us all that trust is not a weakness, but the root from which peace grows." The snow fell softly around them, settling on their cloaks, on the heart tree's roots, muffling the world in a gentle silence. "We'll grow old here," Sansa murmured. "You and I. And after we're gone, the story will continue. Winterfell will always open its gates, always hold the warmth of welcome. It will always remember." And he nodded, heart full, eyes stinging with gratitude. Let it be so. They walked back hand in hand, the castle's lights glowing warm ahead. In the years to come, Storms would return, and so would spring, hardship and harvest, grief and celebration. But the heart of Winterfell, rooted in trust and rebirth, in laughter and love, would hold, enduring through the long winters and into every new dawn. And so, in the hush of snow and the promise of the coming year, Tyrion Lannister, once outcast, once wanderer, found peace that was neither accident nor gift, but the sure, hard-won triumph of a life rebuilt and shared. And all who followed would inherit a home where even the deepest winter could not dim the bright, unending hope of spring. The new year settled gently over Winterfell, the deep cold of winter giving way to milder winds and slow, lengthening days. The first thaw came not with a roar but with a sigh. Snow sliding in lazy clumps from the high slate roofs, water running in rivulets through the courtyards and down the old flagstone steps. Children flocked to the thawing pools, boots forgotten, daring one another to break the last crust of ice, their shouts echoing beneath banners that danced in the brisk breeze. Life, ever hopeful, stretched and shook itself awake. Inside, the keep was alive with a different kind of energy. With winter's end came the great tally, stores counted, cellars swept, the health of every flock and field discussed by candlelight. Sansa and Tyrion presided over these rituals, with the calm of old hands, her pen scratching neat columns on parchment, his mind always spinning 3 steps ahead, recalling the numbers from last year and the year before. Their partnership was so seamless now, it barely required words. A glance, a lifted brow, a smile, and the business of the realm moved as surely as any river. Eddard took to the roads, as he always did at the turning of the seasons, riding out to meet with the bannermen and freefolk chiefs, listening to their grievances and their hopes for the new year. Lyanna gathered the wildling children and the castle's young squires for long runs through the woods, teaching them not only how to track or shoot, but how to read the hush of the trees and the whisper of snowmelt underfoot. Arya returned in time for the last of the frost, her hair windblown, her eyes bright. She brought tales from the road. A new stone bridge finished at last hearth, a wildling girl who had tamed a great elk, a fight broken up in a distant market, not with steel but with a clever jest and the promise of better ale. She was older now, but her step was light and her laughter unchained. Tyrion found himself spending more and more time among the youngest in the keep. He taught reading in the mornings in the sunny corner of the library. Children clustered at his knees as he spun out riddles and fables from distant lands. He wrote out letters for the maesters, crafted new stories for the next feast, and on the coldest afternoons settled by the kitchen fire with a mug of cider, helping plan the first spring festival in years. The festival had grown from a simple meal in the great hall to a week of games, feasts, and songs that drew people from every corner of the north and beyond. Sansa worked with the head cook and the steward, planning banquets of roasted meats and candied roots, nut bread and wild honey. Lyanna marshaled the archery contests and races. Arya led the children in a great scavenger hunt that spilled into every shadowed corner of Winterfell and out into the orchards and the godswood. On the first day, Tyrion watched as banners went up, the direwolf and the lion entwined, the wildling marks stitched in bright red and blue, a new pennant from the Summer Isles and the old crescent of the Vale. Eddard returned in the evening, his cloak muddy, his smile easy as he embraced his parents and shook hands with every guest. The festival glimmered with life, traders and tinkers, singers from White Harbor, wildlings with baskets of smoked fish and sweet roots, even a party of Ironborn who'd come overland, bearing a cask of brine wine and the strange, bracing humor of the western coast. At the heart of it all were Sansa and Tyrion, their laughter echoing together as easily as if they had always ruled side by side. One night, after the main feast, Arya dragged the whole household into the yard for a midnight snowball fight, torches blazing, children shrieking with glee. Lyanna and the wildlings made barricades, Eddard led the defenders, and Tyrion himself became the general of the southern host, commanding cooks and maids and merchants alike. Sansa watched from the steps, her arms wrapped around herself, laughing until tears ran down her cheeks. Later, the family gathered in the godswood, the snow still swirling softly. Sansa and Tyrion knelt beneath the heart tree with their children and grandchildren, each leaving a stone or a sprig of green at the roots, a wish for the new year, a promise for the future. The youngest, a wildling boy with a voice like thunder, asked Tyrion to tell a story. So Tyrion spoke of peace. He told how a lion had once come to the north, broken and weary, and found a wolf maiden whose kindness changed the world. He spoke of the old days and the long winter, of loss and hope and the slow, stubborn growth of trust. He spoke of bannermen and wildlings and maesters and cooks, of stories carried by ravens and songs taught by grandmothers, of every little act of courage that became the foundation of peace. He ended with the wish that had shaped his life. Let our story outlast us, not in the stone, but in the hearts and hands of those who come after. Let them remember not just our names, but the ways we chose hope over hatred, kindness over pride. Let Winterfell always be a place where even the coldest night is made warm by welcome and laughter. In the hush that followed, Sansa pressed her lips to his brow. You are the heart of the story, my lion, she whispered. Tyrion shook his head, smiling through the sting of tears. No, we are the heart, all of us. As the festival waned and spring advanced, the rhythm of life resumed. Seeds were sown in the gardens and fields, ships were sighted on the river, travelers came and went. Eddard departed for White Harbor to help oversee the library's expansion. Lyanna rode north with wildling scouts. Arya vanished down the King's Road with a promise to return for midsummer. Sansa and Tyrion settled into a peace that was never still, never finished. There were always letters to write, stories to tell, disputes to mediate, hands to hold and comfort to give. But there was also time, precious, ordinary time, for walks in the orchard, shared meals in the solar, quiet laughter in the late hours as the fire burned low. Sometimes, at sunset, they stood together atop the ramparts, watching the shadows lengthen over the fields and woods, the lights of Winterfell glowing warm behind them. Do you regret any of it? Sansa would ask, her voice soft with wonder. Not a day, Tyrion always answered. Not a single word or moment. This, he would gesture to the world around them, to the lives made safe and full. This is the only legacy I ever truly wanted. She would rest her head on his shoulder, the hush between them more eloquent than any song. The seasons would turn again, as they always did. Winters and springs, griefs and feasts, stories remembered and retold. Tyrion's name would one day become legend, half fact and half fable, a clever lion who found a home among wolves and helped teach the North to hope. But for now, in the mellow warmth of a world remade, Tyrion Lannister lived his last and happiest years with Sansa at his side, grateful for every dawn, every tale, every echo of laughter in the halls of Winterfell, where peace, once a fragile dream, had become a lasting truth, as sure and bright as the promise of the next new day. Ya, K, Ta, Mun, Ho, and Sha. The summer deepened into its richest, gentlest fullness, and the north blossomed beneath the sun. Winterfell's stone was warm to the touch, cloaked in vines and wild roses, the air sweet with hay, and the distant tang of river water. The castle bustled in those months, laughter and song drifting from every open window, the clang of the smithy ringing out, bakers rolling dough, children's games winding from the orchard to the godswood. In these golden days, Tyrion moved with a quiet, satisfied pace, more at ease than he'd ever been in any southern court. Sansa's hair shone with silver and sun as she moved through the gardens, her eyes calm, her smile gentle. She took counsel each morning with the head gardener and the steward, meeting with healers and cooks, always seeking to know each name and face. Her patience was endless, her word, law. Wildlings and Northmen alike brought their worries and news to her. When she sat beneath the heart tree in the evenings, it was as if peace itself had settled on her shoulders. Tyrion often joined her, carrying a battered old book or a flask of cider. Some evenings he brought parchment and ink, scratching out the tales of the realm, old legends reborn in the light of this new north. Other times he simply watched the world around him, the slow arc of swallows overhead, Eddard teaching wildling children their letters beneath the apple trees, Lyanna returning from the woods with a bow over her shoulder and 2 wild rabbits for the cookpot. Arya, her hair clipped short now and streaked with gray, was rarely still. She left and returned with the rhythm of the tide, bringing news from Braavos, the Wall or Old Town, tales of sea captains, distant markets, a maester who'd crossed the Dothraki Sea, and come back with a taste for spicy stew. When she was home, she led the children on wild adventures, hunting mushrooms or mapping secret passages. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, but there was a gravity in her hugs, a sense that she understood how precious time had become. The seasons were generous. Fields of barley waved in gold-green seas beyond the castle walls. The orchards drooped with fruit. Every meal featured apples, pears, blackberries, honey, dyed berries. Summer visitors filled the guest quarters, ironborn captains trading salt for wool, Dorne scholars bringing riddles and saffron, a quiet pair of Braavosi with a rare old song. At night, the great hall was full. Music from White Harbor mingling with wildling pipes, the stomp of feet on flagstone, the thunder of laughter. Sansa's table always had room for a stranger, and Tyrion's quick tongue bridged every dialect and custom. It was a year for great works as well. The old granaries were rebuilt with the help of Sarnori masons, the wildlings constructed a new mill by the river, and the children of Winterfell, highborn and wildling alike, performed their first play for the midsummer feast. Eddard, his voice steady and kind, presided over a council of banners, his decisions shaping the next decade of trade and harvest. Lyanna, beloved by all for her courage and fierce loyalty, led patrols into the mountains, resolving disputes before they could grow into feuds. Tyrion took quiet pride in the life he'd helped build. His days began in the library, helping wildling boys and girls puzzle out the words of old histories. He composed letters for the university at White Harbor, corresponded with the maesters, offered stories to the scribes who came to record the North's wisdom for the wider world. Sometimes, as the sun slanted through the windows, he would set his quill down and simply listen. To the rustle of parchment, the hum of bees outside, the distant clatter of Arya's laughter or Lyanna's shout in the yard. Sansa and Tyrion cherished the smallest rituals. Tea in the garden at first light, Sansa reading aloud at dusk, Tyrion slipping out to the kitchen for a taste of bread before anyone else had risen. In their evenings, they shared old memories and new plans. Sansa dreamed of a great glass house to keep the orchard blooming through winter. Tyrion imagined a school where every child, no matter their birth, could learn the lore of both the North and the Free Cities. One morning, a raven came from the Vale. Lord Royce, old now but shrewd as ever, invited Sansa and Tyrion to visit in the autumn, promising a gathering of old allies and a week of mountain feasts. Sansa smiled as she read the letter, passing it to Tyrion. "Do you think we can still stomach their strong wine?" Tyrion grinned, his eyes twinkling. "If the company is as good as the wine is strong, I'll risk it." Before they could make the journey, another delegation arrived. The Princess of Dorne, radiant and clever, with her heir and a train of musicians and cooks. The yard filled with laughter and the scent of southern spices. Feasts stretched long into the night, music echoing from the towers. The princess and Sansa exchanged gifts, embroidered silks and a rare book of northern stories bound in blue leather. Tyrion spent hours with the Dornish cook, learning how to season the rich lamb of the north with saffron and mint. During the visit, the princess proposed a new alliance, a festival to unite the 3 great northern ports, a celebration of trade and knowledge. "Let our children know each other's songs before they ever learn to draw a sword," she said at the council table. Eddard and Lyanna offered their eager support, and Tyrion, pen in hand, drafted the first charter before the night was through. As the guests departed, the days shortened and the leaves began to yellow at the edges. Sansa and Tyrion stood together in the orchard, arms twined, watching the fruit fall. "It is a good world," Sansa said quietly, her eyes bright. "It is," Tyrion replied, "because you made it so." They spoke too of what might come, of grandchildren's weddings, of winters yet to endure, of the slow turning of the realm, from their hands to Eddard's and Lyanna's and the children after. Sometimes Sansa would pause mid-walk and smile at Tyrion with that old knowing look. "I used to think the world would end in fire or ice," she would say. "But now I see. It ends, if we are lucky, in laughter and bread, and the gentle hush of a summer evening." He pressed her hand. "And perhaps in story. In the telling and the keeping. In the way the world remembers us, not for our battles, but for our choices." The last feast of summer was held beneath lanterns strung from tree to tree. The cooks roasted boar and apples, baked loaves in every shape, filled the tables with pies and cider, cheese and honey. Lyanna recited a poem she'd learned from a wildling elder. Eddard led the singing of an old harvest hymn. Arya, eyes shining, danced with the children, and then sat beside Tyrion as he spun a story of lions and wolves, dragons and storms, all ending, by his design, in peace. After the feast, Tyrion and Sansa wandered the Godswood, the grass cool beneath their feet. The air was thick with the scent of apples, the heart tree's red leaves bright in the dusk. "Do you regret anything?" Sansa asked, her voice soft. He shook his head. "Only that I did not find this place, this life, sooner." She rested her head on his shoulder, and together they listened to the music of the north, wind in the leaves, distant laughter, the slow, sure beat of a peace made real. So the world turned, seasons passing in a harmony of joy and longing, memory and hope. And in the heart of Winterfell, love endured, quiet and steadfast, a beacon to all who wandered and all who came home.